Picture a world where you have lived your entire life and you have never once clearly seen your own face. Not once. Not the way you glance at yourself every morning without thinking. The bathroom mirror, the phone camera, the dark window of the subway car. All those surfaces that hand you your own image before you've even decided you want it. The things that tell you, instantly and without ceremony, exactly what you look like to the rest of the world. Now take every single one of them away. What are you left with? A shimmer of yourself in the surface of dark water. A blob of flesh-coloured suggestion in the back of a pewter spoon. The distorted reddish-bronze ghost that looks back from a piece of beaten metal. A face that is recognisably yours, but stretched, warped, subtly wrong. The kind of reflection that makes you wonder if you look like yourself, or if yourself was always this strange. A ghost in a darkened window, a smear on a clean knife blade, and the eyes of other people, which are the most unreliable mirrors of all, because people lie. They flatter. They see what they want to see. Or they see nothing at all, because they're too busy with their own lives to look at you carefully enough to tell you that you've got a smear of soot across your cheekbone, and your cap has shifted 3 inches to the left. This is London in the autumn of 1693. This is the city you're waking up in right now, in the pitch dark of 5 in the morning, in the attic room above the kitchen of a merchant's house on Cheapside, and you have never once seen your own face clearly. Not clearly. Not the way it actually is. Not the way other people see it. The year is 1693. The city is 500,000 people packed into a space that would struggle to hold 1/10 that number comfortably. It's the reign of William and Mary. 5 years since the Glorious Revolution, since the Dutch king came to save England from itself, since the political world turned upside down and somehow continued. The city outside your window smells of horse dung and coal smoke and the Thames at low tide, and the particular combination of flesh and wool that 500,000 people living close together always produces. It is filthy and extraordinary and loud and alive in the way that only a city on the make can be alive. Frantic, purposeful, a little desperate, always moving. And you, Mary Sutton of Hincton Green in Wiltshire, arrived here 3 months ago with a letter of introduction tucked inside your apron and a very incomplete idea of what you're getting yourself into. You're 16 years old. You're working as a lady's maid, or rather you're being trained as one, the previous girl having married a bootmaker in Suffolk and departed, in the household of Mr. and Mrs. Alvington, cloth merchants Cheapside. You are competent and observant and learning very fast, and you cannot see your own face. I make these history stories, and I genuinely have no idea whether you're listening to sleep or whether you're just the kind of person who wants to know what it actually felt like, the daily grain of it, the physical reality of lives that happened before the things we take for granted. Either way, get comfortable. We're going back. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. Not comfortable darkness, not room with the curtains pulled darkness. This is absolute darkness. The kind that doesn't notice you're awake. It presses against your open eyes like a hand over your face, flat and complete, and for half a second, the half second before the body remembers where it put itself last night, you have no idea where you are. Then the smell arrives. It comes in layers, the way everything in London comes in layers, the way this city is always giving you more than one thing at once. First, tallow, the candle you burned for the quarter hour you allowed yourself last night, the one you share with Bess and guard carefully because tallow candles cost money, and money is counted and recounted and stretched at your level. and the smell of it is the smell of animal fat rendered and hardened and burned, faintly rancid, faintly meat-adjacent, the smell of something that was once alive and has been converted into light at significant cost. Second, coal smoke. There's no chimney in the attic room. The heat that reaches you comes up from the kitchen below, and with it rises the coal smoke and the wood smoke and the ghost of last night's supper that has soaked through the floorboards. It's a thick smell, heavy, the smell of London's air in miniature, the thing that turns the city's daylight a peculiar yellowish grey and deposits itself on every surface, including your skin while you sleep. Third, Bess. Not her fault. In 1693, being clean costs hot water, and hot water costs fuel, and fuel costs money. And money is not something anyone in this attic room has in any excess. Bess smells of wool and old work and the fading ghost of the lavender she keeps in her apron pocket in summer months ago now. The dried herbs past their use but still faintly present. She smells like someone who works hard and lives simply and is doing the best she can with the resources available, which is the same thing everyone in this house smells like, including you. Fourth, under everything else, the smell of yourself. You under your blanket, you in your unwashed shift, you carrying the particular scent of your own skin and hair in the way that only becomes apparent in the mornings, before the day's work adds its own layers on top, before coal smoke and kitchen steam and the street outside do their work on you. This is what 100,000 Londoners smell like at 5 a.m. This is not shame. This is just life. Welcome to Cheapside, autumn 1693. The church bells have already started. St. Mary le Bow is nearest. Its bells, the Bow bells, the ones that say you're a Londoner if you were born in their sound, ring through the walls of this building the way a physical thing passes through a building, not just heard but felt, a vibration in the plaster. Other bells layer on top. St. Vedast up the street, St. Lawrence Jury further along, the bells of a dozen churches triangulating the hour through the dark morning air. 5 o'clock, maybe 5 past. You need to get up. You swing your legs over the edge of the straw mattress before you've made any conscious decision about it, because the body, given a few months of repetition, stops requiring the mind's permission for certain things. Your feet find the cold wooden floor. The cold of it is sudden and complete. The boards have been cold all night and they take heat from you the moment you make contact, and there is no carpet, no rushes, nothing between you and the wood has been cold for hours. Bess stirs beside you, doesn't wake. You find your clothes in the dark. This is not a small or simple thing, and it is worth spending a moment on, because most people, when they imagine women in history getting dressed, think of the elaborate production, the stays and petticoats and bodices and pins and ribbons and lace. And yes, that exists. That is Mrs. Alvington's mourning, and it is a production, and it is your job to assist with it. But what you are doing right now, at 5 a.m, in the dark, by feel alone, is simpler and simultaneously more demanding, because you're doing it without light, without a mirror, without anyone to check your work. Your shift first, the linen one you slept in, which is ridden up and needs pulling straight. You do this by feel, running your hands along the hem and the body, checking for twists, for the places where the fabric has bunched or rucked during sleep. Your hands have learned the difference between a clean, unwrinkled shift and one that needs attention, between a linen seam lying flat and one that's folded under itself. You couldn't explain how they know this. They just do. The stays, You lace them yourself, behind your back, by feel, through the specific holes in the specific order with the specific tension that you have calibrated over years of practice, tight enough to give you the shape expected of a respectable woman in 1693, loose enough to breathe in while carrying buckets and standing for 12 hours straight. You know this tension the way you know other things about your body, not by looking, but by existing inside it. By the difference in your breathing when it's too tight, and the difference in your posture when it's too loose. The petticoat, heavy wool. You feel its weight settle as it falls round your legs, the slight scratching of the fabric against your skin, the warmth it promises. The gown. Dark, as yours always is. Servant dark, practical dark. The colour that doesn't show marks as badly as lighter shades. You button the front buttons by feel. The top ones wait until the cap is on. The cap is the thing. A white linen cap. Clean. You try to keep it clean, which is a battle, because everything in London wants to dirty white linen and the coal smoke and the kitchen steam and the general greasiness of the air. And it has to sit straight. The front edge level on both sides. The back tucked properly. The whole thing pinned through your hair with 3 pins, which you count as you take them from the little dish on the windowsill, because finding a lost pin in a straw mattress is the kind of discovery that starts your morning with a specific misery. You put on the cap by touch. You pin it by touch. Your fingers checking the angles, feeling for symmetry that you can only estimate. You run your fingers along the front edge, even on both sides, you think, or close enough. You check the back fold. You think it's right. You think it's right. This is the operative phrase. You cannot know it's right. The basin is by the window, the water in it left from last night, and there is a skim of ice around the edges, the thin ice of an October cold snap that has been working on the water all night. You press your finger through it and it shatters easily. The thin crackling break of the weakest possible ice, and you bring both hands up through the surface and splash the water on your face, and the cold of it is a genuine shock. The kind that makes you draw a fast breath through your nose and hold it. Cold water in the morning is more than a ritual. It's diagnostic. You feel your face with your hands, not grooming yet, feeling, checking. The palms of your hands against your cheeks, your forehead, your chin. You're learning to read your face by touch, the way you read everything else you can't see by touch. The particular texture of a spot forming, the puffiness around the eyes from too little sleep, the gritty feel of skin that needs cleaning. You wash. Your hands come away grey in the dark because London air is never clean, and it settles on your skin while you sleep and your skin holds it, and the water in the basin goes dark immediately. There's a pot in the corner for dirtied water. You dump the basin contents and refill with the jug. You can feel that your face is cleaner. You cannot see it. You dry your hands on your apron, and you button the top of your gown and you go downstairs to begin the day. The kitchen is warm. This is the first genuine luxury of the morning. The warmth of the kitchen after the attic. And Mrs. Palmer the cook is already at the fire, in the way that Mrs. Palmer is always already at the fire, which is before you, which is before anyone. She's a solid woman of about 50, who's been cooking for this household since before the current Mr. Alvington was married, and she moves through this kitchen with the certainty of someone in their own territory, which she is, because this kitchen is hers. She's at the hearth stirring something she does not look up. "You're late," she says. "You're not late. It is perhaps 5:05 and no one specified 5 exactly, but you've been in this house for 3 months. and you've learned what Mrs. Palmer means when she says you're late, which is, I am working already, and I observe that you are not, which I resent, which I will express as a factual statement, rather than a criticism in the hope that this makes it harder to argue with. Sorry, Mrs. Palmer, you say. Get the water on, and then go up to Mrs. Alvington when it's warmed. 1:30. The water, out to the pump in the courtyard, the bucket, the cold handle slick with morning damp, the cobblestones underfoot uneven and wet, filling the pot and dragging it to the fire. The pump is maybe 30 feet from the kitchen door, and those 30 feet include 3 changes in surface: kitchen flags, courtyard cobble, the slightly higher step at the kitchen door, and you know all of them now in the dark, your feet navigating by memory and the faint grey wash of the pre-dawn sky. There is a moment, while you're at the pump, when the sky above the roofline of Cheapside lightens very slightly at the edge. Not dawn yet, not even close to dawn, but the very first whisper of it, a degree or two less dark than absolute black, a suggestion that the dark has a direction and is moving. London wakes before the light. London has always waked before the light. You fill the pot. You fill the second pot. You go back inside. Mrs. Palmer has allowed you, since the second week, to take a small bowl of water for your morning face washing. Warm water, properly warm, from the pot near the fire. This is a professional decision more than a generous one. A girl who can't wash her face can't present herself upstairs, and Mrs. Alvington notices everything, and Mrs. Palmer does not need that particular inconvenience. You take your bowl, you tip it slightly, catching the light from the fire on its surface. This is the first attempt of the day to see yourself. The water in the bowl, dark clay bowl, dark inside, shows you a version of yourself by firelight. A person, your general oval of face, your eyes, 2 darker areas, your cap, white at the top. She is orange-tinged, this water woman, because the firelight turns everything orange, and she shifts and wavers every time you breathe, because your breath disturbs the surface, which is one of the fundamental problems with water as a mirror. You need to hold very still. And holding very still while craning over a bowl in a kitchen at 5 in the morning is more difficult than it sounds. The face in the water shows you something wrong at the left side of your cap. You can't tell if it's tilted or if it's just the water's angle distorting things. The water doesn't tell you. The water shows you a possibility, not a certainty. You tip your chin, trying to get a better angle. The water face tips with you. This is all you get. This is the first tool. You set the bowl down and go to the copper pots. The copper pots hang by the fireplace, the largest ones on the heaviest hooks, and they are polished by the scullery girl on Fridays to the degree that's required for a well-kept kitchen, which means they gleam reasonably. The largest one, the soup pot, wide-bellied, the one you can almost see your whole face in, shows you a curved world, everything bowed out from the centre like a reflection in the inside of a globe. In the copper pot you can see a small figure with a white cap, face too wide across the cheekbones, chin narrowing to a strange point, the firelight making everything reddish. You tilt your face. The reflection tilts with you, distorting differently as the angle changes. This is the second tool. Better than water, it stays still, but significantly distorted. You look at the left side of your cap in the copper pot. It is. Yes, it has shifted. The front left edge has dropped slightly, the pin on that side not doing its full job. You reach up and resettle the pin, pressing it through the cap and through your hair more firmly, feeling for the right placement by the slight tension change when it's seated correctly. You check again in the copper pot. Better. You cannot be sure. You take out the pewter spoon. This is a specific spoon in a specific drawer, the third one from the left in the second drawer down, and you know it because you've taken it out before. It has a slight dent in the handle that makes it slightly less desirable for actual table use, which means it sits at the back of the drawer more reliably than the others, which means you can find it consistently. The bowl of the spoon, the concave side, will show you. If you hold it at exactly the right angle to the firelight and tilt it correctly, something very close to your eyes and upper face. Just the eyes, just a fragment. But it's a flattish fragment, not curved the way the copper pot is curved, and the proportions are closer to accurate. You hold the spoon up, turn it until the firelight catches, tilt again. There you are. Your eyes, close, slightly blurred at the edges but recognizable, looking back at you from the bowl of a pewter spoon in a kitchen in 1693 like they're looking up from the bottom of a very small pond. Something still in the inner corner of your left eye, dried sleep matter that you missed in the wash. You bring up your thumbnail and deal with it. Look again. Better. Your eyes are, you think from this and from what you've assembled over time, a greyish colour, somewhere between grey and brown, the colour of river water in overcast weather. That's the closest description you've arrived at. Your mother told you they were blue, but your mother was looking at you in the soft light of a Wiltshire farmhouse, and possibly telling you something she believed rather than something she saw. Bess has said grey. You think grey. You put the spoon back and pick up the pot of water that's warmed sufficiently, and you go upstairs to Mrs. Alvington. The house is 4 stories on Cheapside. The staircase is narrow, the steps slightly uneven in the way of old houses, each riser a slightly different height from the others, in the way that becomes invisible once you've been climbing them for 3 months, but was genuinely alarming in the first week. The second floor, Mrs. Alvington's floor, her bedroom, the dressing room that connects to it. Mr. Alvington's study at the other end of the hall. The door to the front bedroom where Josiah sleeps and does not stay asleep. Josiah is on the stairs. He is always on the stairs. He is 7 years old and apparently requires less sleep than anyone else in the household, and his preferred location for his early morning reading is the 3rd step from the landing, which is exactly in the path you need to take to bring a pot of warm water to his mother. "Morning, Mary," he says without looking up from whatever he's reading. He reads things you've never been told to read and probably shouldn't be reading at 7. Heavy books with dark bindings that he takes from his father's study when his father isn't there. "Morning, Master Josiah. Would you like to move your legs?" He moves his legs. You squeeze past with the pot held out in front of you. Carefully, hot water being the kind of thing you don't want to spill when squeezed past a 7-year-old on a narrow staircase. You knock twice on Mrs. Alvington's bedroom door. 2 clear knocks, then you wait. "Come." The warmth hits you first. The bedroom is dramatically warmer than anywhere else in the house, the fireplace having been stoked before you arrived and doing its work efficiently, and then the smell, which is different from the kitchen, from the attic. Wood smoke, yes, but also dried lavender in sachets, and rose water, and a faint expensive something that you've decided is the smell of money itself, which is probably not accurate, but which is what it smells like to you. This particular combination of quality and maintenance and things that don't have to smell like work. And the looking glass, it's on the dressing table, which is against the wall between the 2 windows, positioned to catch the morning light coming through both of them. You try not to look at it directly. This is not a rule Mrs. Alvington has stated explicitly. It's a rule that lives in the architecture of the situation, in the way she refers to it as my glass, my things, my looking glass, a possessive grammar that extends to everything in this room, and especially to the oval of silvered Venetian glass in its frame of gilded plaster, carved with flowers and small running figures that you've decided are goddesses. The glass is, you catch a glimpse of it crossing the room, the edge of it, the bright suggestion of it in your peripheral vision, perfectly flat, perfectly clear, a flat, clear, true reflecting surface. You set down the water jug. You attend to the fire, adding coal from the scuttle, coaxing it higher with the poker, the coal catching and the fire brightening, the heat increasing. Mrs. Alvington is behind the bed curtains, green velvet, heavy. You draw them back. The enclosed air comes out warm and slightly close, the breath of the night and the woman who slept in it. She's among her pillows, her hair loose, the only time you see it loose in the morning before the day's construction begins, mostly grey, dark brown, threading through the grey. She has a strong face, the kind of face that suggests that people who try things without asking her first tend to regret it. She seems, in the morning with her hair down, more like an actual human and less like a specific authority. You have come to appreciate these brief moments. "Good morning, Ma'am," you say. She makes a sound that might be good morning compressed into something non-verbal by the distance between waking and speech. She begins slowly the movement towards sitting up, and now the work begins. The warm water, the face cloth, the soap. Real soap. Almond-scented, from somewhere the household accounts describe as the Turkish soap merchant on Lombard Street, which is expensive and which tells you something about Mrs. Alvington's standards and Mr. Alvington's willingness to support them. You lay everything out in the right order, cloth, soap, the smaller rinsing basin, because the order matters, because doing things in the wrong order is the kind of thing that makes this room feel wrong. And a room that feels wrong is a room in which you have failed. She washes. You attend. Her hair next. The silver-bristled brush. This brush costs more than you earn in a month, and you handle it accordingly. And the process of working through the night's tangles, section by section, starting at the ends, working upward. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Mrs. Alvington's hair has a pattern to it. The places where it catches and the places where it runs free. The thin patch at the left temple that has been thinning for probably a year or two. The knot that forms behind her right ear with the regularity of a natural feature. You've mapped her hair the way you'd map unfamiliar territory, through exploration and the occasional wrong turn, and the slow accumulation of knowledge about where the difficulties are. She looks in the mirror while you work. This is what the mirror is for. For her, feedback. Real-time visual information about what's happening to her appearance, the thing you're building and she's evaluating, a collaboration in which you make the thing and she can see it and you cannot. You work by touch, by the resistance of the brush, by the tension of the hair in your fingers. She sees the result. This is the fundamental arrangement, and you've learned to use it. Because you are dressing her hair from behind and she is looking in the mirror. You can watch the mirror past her shoulder and get a secondary, backward view of your own work. You can see the back of her head and the structure you're building from an angle that gives you something. Not everything, but something. And in the mirror, occasionally, briefly, you catch yourself. Your face at the edge, behind her face, over her shoulder, appearing and disappearing as you move. It is still slightly startling even now. The first time it happened, about 2 weeks into the job, you actually lost your rhythm for half a second, because the face in the mirror, The face at the edge of the Venetian glass over Mrs. Elvington's shoulder was so much clearer than anything you'd seen before that for a moment you genuinely didn't recognize it. This sounds dramatic. It's not dramatic. It's just what happens when you've spent 16 years seeing yourself in fragments, in distortions, in the watercolour approximations of pewter and bronze and dark water, and then suddenly you see yourself in a real mirror. The first instinct is, who is that? The second instinct, arriving within a second, that's me. And the third instinct, arriving slightly after that, is a complicated mixture of recognition and uncertainty. Because the face in the flat clear glass is simultaneously the most you've ever seen, and also slightly foreign, slightly other. The you that exists in the world rather than the you that exists in your imagination. You've developed a skill for catching these glimpses. You've developed an equal skill for not appearing to catch these glimpses. Because appearing to look at yourself in the mistress's mirror is the kind of thing that would be noticed, and the kind of thing that would raise a question about your propriety that you don't particularly want to answer. This morning you catch your face 3 times in the working of her hair. First time, your cap, left side. It looks straight. The correction you made with a pin in the kitchen appears to have held. Good. Second time, your eyes. They do, in the flat clarity of the Venetian mirror, look grey. A greyish brown. Your mother was partly right. There is blue in there if you look for it. But the dominant impression is grey, a warm grey, the colour of the Thames on an overcast morning when the light comes through the clouds, flat and even. Third time, the spot on your chin, which is, you already knew this from your finger, bad, red, noticeable. The kind of spot that announces itself to everyone who looks at your face before you get to announce yourself. There's nothing to be done about it. You look away. You finish her hair, the stays, the petticoats, 3 of them today, wool and linen, the October cold having made her choose the warmer option. The gown, deep blue, the good wool, the one that takes about 12 minutes to do up properly because the back hooks are small and numerous, and you do them all with your eyes on the back of her neck rather than your hands. Working from the sensation in your fingertips rather than from sight, which is how you do most things. And through all of this she looks in the mirror. She checks the set of her collar. She checks the fall of the gown at her shoulders. She turns slightly to check the profile. She adjusts a curl with one finger, the confident adjustment of someone who can see exactly what needs adjusting, who has had a mirror her whole adult life, who has never needed to do this by feel. The collar, she says, it needs pressing. Not an accusation, an observation. Yes, ma'am, you say, and take the collar and go downstairs to the flat iron by the fire. And you are in the kitchen, pressing the collar with the flat iron that you've heated on the coal and tested against a scrap of dark cloth. Never test a hot iron on light cloth, because you'll mark it and the mark won't come out, and that's a conversation you don't want to have. And you are thinking about the mirror. You're thinking about what it would feel like to stand in front of it without her there, just you. 5 minutes. 5 unobserved minutes in front of a Venetian looking glass. You know you shouldn't. You know you won't. You bring the pressed collar upstairs and she accepts it, and the morning continues. The morning always continues. Let me stop here for a moment and tell you something about what that mirror actually is. Because Mrs. Alvington's looking glass is not just a beautiful object. It is, in 1693, an object whose existence represents something remarkable about the world you're living in, about what people were willing to do and willing to risk and willing to die for in the name of seeing themselves clearly. The glassmakers of Venice, the men who made the glass that Mrs. Alvington looks into every morning, have been making mirrors in the furnaces of the island of Murano since the 13th century, since the 1200s. For over 400 years, give or take, the Venetian Republic has held a near monopoly on the production of the finest glass in the world, including the flat, clear, mercury and tin-backed glass that gives a true reflection. The technique is extraordinarily difficult to develop and extraordinarily easy to learn if someone shows you, which is why Venice protected it as though it were a military secret. The Council of Ten, Venice's intelligence apparatus, was clear on this. Glassmakers were prisoners of their own skill. They lived on the island of Murano. All of them, the entire glass industry, moved there from Venice proper in the 13th century, officially because of fire risk, because Venice is built of wood and burns badly, but also because putting the glassmakers on an island meant you could keep an eye on them. On Murano they were treated extraordinarily well. They had their own laws, their own courts. Their daughters could marry into the Venetian nobility, an unimaginable social elevation in a society as stratified as Venice's. In exchange, they didn't leave, they didn't talk, they didn't share. If a glassmaker left, tried to take his knowledge to another country, tried to offer his skills to a foreign court, the Council of Ten sent people after him, not to bring him back, to ensure that the secret left with him went no further. There are records of assassinations. There are deaths attributed to natural causes that no historian who examines them believes were natural. There were men who made it to Germany and France, and who died mysteriously within months of establishing new workshops. This is the level of violence attached to the art of making mirrors. This is what the Venetians thought it was worth. And then the French got tired of paying Venice for the privilege of seeing themselves clearly. In 1665, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, Louis XIV's finance minister, and a man who took the economics of luxury production as personally as some people take insults, decided that France was spending too much money importing mirrors from Venice, and he wanted that money to stay in France. He sent agents to Venice. He bribed glassmakers. He offered them money, safety, identity papers, a new life in France. He promised protection from the Council of Ten's agents, a promise he then had to honour when the agents actually came. Because they did come, at least 2 Venetian glassmakers who went to France were poisoned or stabbed. In circumstances that no one could prove were deliberate, but no one could seriously maintain were accidents. Colbert established the Manufacture Royale des Glaces de Miroir in Saint-Gobain, north of Paris. The French technique was different from the Venetian. Instead of blowing glass and then flattening it, they poured molten glass onto great flat tables and rolled it smooth, which allowed them to make much larger sheets than Venice could produce by blowing. This is how the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles came to exist. 357 mirrors in a gallery above the gardens, completed in 1689, 4 years before this morning, the most audacious use of reflective glass in human history to that point. Louis XIV looking at himself in triplicate and quadruplicate across the length of a gallery, his own reflection multiplied as many times as his glory required, which is, frankly, a lot of times. The French mirrors were beginning to spread by the time you arrived in London. The glassmakers Mrs. Alvington's husband purchased, the oval in its gilded frame, that one is Venetian, bought before the French alternatives were available in sufficient quality, bought at a price that you don't know, but that you can estimate from certain hints, from the way Mrs. Alvington speaks about it as though it is a treasure rather than just an object of use. But in the haberdasher's shop on the corner, the small looking glass on the counter, the one you can use while pretending to examine ribbon. That's probably French. Second-hand French. The backing slightly deteriorated at the edges, spots where the tin mercury amalgam has let go of the glass. But functional still, functional enough. And here is the thing about the tin mercury amalgam that backs every looking glass you have access to, including the Venetian oval on Mrs. Alvington's dressing table. It is made partly of mercury, liquid mercury, heated and mixed with tin, the amalgam applied to the back of the glass in a thin layer, and in the process of that application, and in the continuing slow evaporation of the amalgam as the mirror ages, mercury vapour. In the furnaces of Murano, in the workshops of Saint-Gobain, men breathed mercury vapour for years. The symptoms came slowly, trembling hands first, the slight shake that people noticed and attributed to age or to drink. Then the thinking becoming cloudy, uncertain, the mind that was once sharp becoming unreliable, then the body failing in other ways, then death, usually not attributed accurately, listed in records as trembling sickness, or weakness, or the glassmaker's ailment. The most perfect reflective surface available in 1693 is built on the bodies of the men who made it. This is information that does not appear in any advertisement for a looking glass. It is a fact, documented in records that no one is really reading yet, that no one has quite put together into a coherent picture of an industry and its occupational hazards. You don't know this fact. Very few people in 1693 know this fact, but it's true, and the mirror you look into or don't look into or steal glimpses into was made by someone who paid for the making of it. You bring the pressed collar back upstairs. Mrs. Alvington is dressed now, fully assembled, the blue gown closed and the collar in place, and her hair built up into the structure that will last her through the morning and the afternoon, and probably the evening if the evening doesn't ask too much of it. She looks at herself in the mirror one final time, the check, the confirmation, and she turns away and she faces the day. I'll be in the front room, breakfast in an hour. Yes, Mum. You gather the used linens, the discarded nightgown, the hairpins that missed the final arrangement, and sit on the dressing table in a small cluster. You pick them up. You cross the room toward the door, and you stop in front of the mirror. For 1 moment, 2 moments. A moment that extends itself slightly beyond the practical. You look at yourself. Your cap is straight, the left side pin holding firm. Your gown is adequate. A slight pulling at the hip where you've been reaching all morning, a small horizontal crease that will ease as the day goes on. Your collar, the pressed collar, lies flat. The spot on your chin is red and prominent, and you already knew this, and there's still nothing to be done. Your eyes, grey-brown, more awake now than they were in the kitchen, with less shadow under them than you'd feared. Your face is... it is your face. Oval, jaw slightly square at the chin end, a nose that you have never had clear enough information about to fully evaluate, but which the Venetian mirror shows you as straight and proportionate, which is information you had not had before. You look like someone who is not quite enough of one thing to be defined by it. Not beautiful in a way that would make life easier, not plain in a way that would make it harder. A face that is somewhere in the middle of those things, a face that does what faces are supposed to do. That is the container for a person, that shows what the person shows and holds what the person holds. You look like Mary Sutton of Hinkton Green, 3 months into being someone else, someone not quite sure yet who that someone else is going to be. You hear the creak of the back stairs. You move away from the mirror. You go to the door. You go down. Cheapside is doing its morning business and has been since before you woke up. You go out with your list of errands just before 8, when the street has reached its full morning pitch, but before the midday crush makes everything slower. The bakers on Bread Street, the cloth merchants on the other side with a message from Mr. Alvington, and thread from the haberdashers, a specific brown thread for the mending that needs doing, the shade to be matched by eye, which they trust you with. The first sound that hits you when you open the house door is the vendors. They have been selling since 4 or 5 in the morning and they haven't run out of noise yet, and Cheapside at 8 in the morning sounds like if everyone in a medium-sized town decided to shout at once about the specific thing they were selling, and then added in the sounds of horses and cartwheels on cobblestones, and the bells of 7 churches, and the hammering from the ironmongers, and the crying of at least 3 babies. You've learned to walk through it. The technique: shoulders turned slightly sideways, elbows in, eyes on the middle distance, looking for gaps in the crowd the way water finds gaps in rock. Following the path of least resistance. Never stop. Never look confused, even when you are confused. Stopping means becoming an obstacle, and obstacles in London don't get walked around, they get walked through. And in the windows. This is your second set of tools, the ones the street provides. Glass shop windows will give you a reflection if the conditions cooperate, and the conditions are brighter outside than inside. No strong glare from directly above, your face at the right angle to the glass. Ideally a slight pause in your walking that looks like you're examining the goods in the window rather than examining your own face. The goldsmith's on Cheapside is the best in the mornings, because the morning light comes down the street at an angle that hits the window perfectly, and the goldsmith keeps his interior dim to make the jewellery look richer. The silversmith further down has 2 panes in the window, and you've learned that if you position yourself just right, you can check your collar in the left pane and the right side of your cap in the right pane, which gives you 2 data points in the time it takes to appear to be considering whether to buy a silver-handled spoon. You walk, you check, you adjust your pace slightly past the goldsmiths, and you catch your face in the window, cap straight, collar adequate, gown acceptable, spot on chin present. You file the information, you move on. The baker's is Bread Street, half a block down and 1 block left, and you know the route by the smell, the yeast and crust smell that precedes the bakery by about 30 feet on a still morning, that reaches out into the street and catches you before you've turned the corner. You collect the loaves, they're wrapped in cloth and still warm from the oven, and you hold them for a moment, the warmth of them coming through the cloth into your cold hands, before you tuck them under your arm and go. The cloth merchant's next. Mr. Hartley's shop on Friday Street, a smaller and less prosperous cousin to Mr. Alvington's business. The kind of merchant who is in relationship with the bigger merchants above him and takes their messages and runs their small errands in the hope of larger commissions later. You deliver the note. He gives you a folded paper in return, sealed with dark wax. You don't know what either of them say and don't need to. Mr. Hartley has, just inside his door, positioned between the bolts of cloth so that it seems to happen by accident, but you're fairly sure didn't happen by accident, a framed engraving on the wall. The glass over the engraving is clean and well positioned and gives you an excellent reflection, nearly full face, in the second it takes to appear to be reading the text of the engraving on your way out. You check. Cap is still straight from this morning's careful work. Good. The left pin has really held. The haberdasher's is the most important stop, professionally speaking, because of the matching work, and also because of the small looking glass on the counter. You know about this glass. You've known about it since your second week in London, since Bess mentioned it in the slightly reverent tone that you've since learned she uses for any reflective surface better than a pewter plate. It's there for commercial reasons. A woman who can see how a ribbon looks on her will buy more ribbon. And it's available to anyone who comes into the shop, which means it's available to you, which means you use it. You stand in front of it, the thread comparison task giving you legitimate reason to be at the counter, the thread in one hand and the fabric swatch in the other. The glass is French, you think. You've heard enough discussion of the different qualities to have some sense of how to read them, and this one has the slight greenish tint at the edges that French glass sometimes has, different from the Venetian, which is clearer but which you've heard is increasingly hard to get as the Venetian monopoly fractures. There are spots in this glass, the backing deteriorating in the lower right corner, and the colour rendition isn't quite as true as Mrs. Alvington's mirror, but it shows you your face. The thread in this light, tallow candles supplemented by the grey October daylight coming through the window, will be assessed by experience rather than by certainty, because thread colour is one of those things that changes depending on what kind of light you're looking at it under. You hold the 3 candidate spools against the swatch, the lighter brown, the middle brown, the darker brown, the middle one. The middle one matches the swatch in this light and will probably match it in daylight too, and will definitely match it better than either of the others. That one, you tell the haberdasher. He wraps it, and while he wraps it, you check yourself in the glass, your eyes in this glass with this light, grey-brown with purple shadows under them that are more visible than they were in the morning. Your cap, still holding. Your gown. There is a mark on the left cuff, something you must have caught between the baker's and here, a pale smear of something, possibly the flour from the wrapped bread. You pull the cuff back under the outer sleeve. There, you step back out onto Cheapside. It is. You turn your face up briefly to the pale October sky, the clouds thin enough to let a general pallor through without quite becoming sunshine. It is a morning doing its best. Cold, clean in the way London is clean when it hasn't rained in a day or two, the street not yet deep in the mud that comes with every rain. The smell of the street at this hour is dominated by the horses and by the bakers, which is still sending its warm yeast smell down the block. And here, on the pavement, going the other direction, Agnes. You don't know her full name. She is a servant from the house 3 doors down. You've exchanged nods for 3 months. The nod of women who occupy the same general street at the same general hours and have established mutual recognition without having formalized an acquaintance. You've learned from the nods that she is observant. She has the quick eye that some people have, the kind that does a comprehensive visual scan of someone else in about a second, and processes it in another second, and sometimes communicates the result in a 3rd second if something needs to be communicated. She touches your arm lightly. Your cap, she says. Quiet, direct, not unkind. Your hand goes up. You feel the front left edge, the same side that would troubled this morning. The pin, it has not failed entirely, but the cap has shifted slightly, the front edge dipping maybe 1/2 inch. You adjust it, pressing the pin through more firmly. You look at Agnes. She looks at your cap for 2 seconds. Better, she says, and she goes her way. This is the network, the thing nobody writes about. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it is so ordinary, so constant, so unremarkable to the women who use it, that it doesn't feel like something worth noting. It is worth noting. It is one of the primary technologies available to women in 1693 for managing appearance they cannot see. and it functions through a combination of mutual interest and wordless agreement. I will tell you when something is wrong with how you look, because I need you to tell me when something is wrong with how I look, and neither of us can see ourselves clearly enough to manage without this exchange. You've built this network in 3 months, which is about how long it takes to learn who looks at you. Really looks, the professional look, the one that registers detail, and who doesn't, who will mention something and who won't. Agnes looks at you. The woman who sells apples from a basket at the corner of Bread Street looks at you. Mrs. Palmer looks at you in a way that is more critical than helpful, but occasionally produces useful information. Bess looks at you consistently and honestly, which is the most valuable of all. Men look at you in a different way. They either don't look at all, or they look and assess for different information. The general category of your appearance, respectable or not, attractive or not, without attending to the specifics that matter for your professional presentation. A man will tell you that you look nice and have no useful information about whether your cap is straight. A man's eye is not trained on the details of women's dress and appearance, the way women's eyes are trained on each other, necessarily, because women's survival has always partially depended on accurate mutual assessment. You carry the bread and the thread and the returned message back to the house. You deliver things to their various places. You take up your afternoon position, which varies. Sometimes attending Mrs. Alvington if she's receiving visitors, sometimes in the sewing room if there is sewing to do, sometimes in the kitchen helping with preparations if Mrs. Palmer is short of hands, which she's not willing to admit, but which is sometimes evident from the degree of urgency in her movements. Today, the sewing room. There is a pile of mending that has been accumulating in the basket in the corner, the ordinary attrition of a household with fabric, the thin places on Mr. Alvington's shirts, the dropped hem of one of Mrs. Alvington's underlayers, Josiah's trousers which he has somehow torn at both knees, doing whatever it is Josiah does with his knees, which you suspect involves the stairs in ways that stairs were not designed for. You sit by the window in the sewing room, the light coming in from the street, and you mend. Mending is meditative, or it becomes meditative once you've done enough of it to stop having to think about the basic technique. Your hands work. Needle through, pull through, needle through, pull through, the texture of the thread between your fingers, the slight resistance of the thicker weave of the trouser material, and your mind is only half attending. Half attending to the seam, half roaming. You think about what you know, about mirrors, about what you've assembled. Here is what women use in 1693 when they don't have a looking glass. Water in a basin, which tells you shape and colour if you're quick, and the water is still, which it mostly isn't. Water in a bucket, which is worse. Too deep, too dark, the image lost in the depth image. Water in a stream or river, which on a still day at the right angle gives you something remarkable, but which requires that you be near a stream or river, and that the day is still, and that no one is looking at you kneeling on the bank to examine your reflection. Polished metal. Pewter in plates and spoons and the backs of serving implements. Pewter gives you a brownish, slightly blurry image, the colour washed with the pewter's own greyish-yellow tone. It distorts slightly. Pewter is never perfectly flat, but less than copper. Copper gives you more distortion, more warmth of colour, more of yourself curved away from yourself. Silver, polished silver, gives you the best metal reflection available, clearer than pewter, less distorted than copper, but silver serving pieces are locked in cabinets in households that can afford them and not available for improper use. The backs of knives, Steel blades polished clean show you a version of yourself narrow and slightly elongated. The blade of a sharpened knife will show you your eyes and the upper part of your face in a band about an inch wide, which is enough to confirm the state of your eyebrows and whether you have soot on your forehead if you hold it at exactly the right angle. Glass windows, as discussed. The conditions must cooperate, but when they do, a shop window gives you something approaching a real image, not as clear as mirror glass, but not as distorted as metal. And darkness. A darkened room with a candle behind you and a window in front of you, and the night outside. The reflection that windows give at night is sometimes the best you can get. The whole window becoming a kind of dim mirror, your face visible against the darkness outside. This is why women sometimes sit by the window in the evenings checking their appearance in the darkened glass. It is a bit like looking through yourself into the outside world at the same time as looking at yourself. A double image, your face overlaid on the street or the yard or the night, both things present at once. And finally, other women's eyes, which give you real-time observational data about your appearance as it actually exists in the world, filtered through a human perception that is sometimes accurate and sometimes charitable, and sometimes omits things out of kindness, and sometimes doesn't omit things out of honesty. The variable quality of this tool is its major limitation, but it's the most portable, the most available, the one you carry with you everywhere, and on many days it's the most useful of everything you have. Before you were in London, before Venetian mirrors or French mirrors or any glass mirrors of any kind, what did women use? They used metal. The oldest mirrors in the world that have been found by the people who dig up the past are made of obsidian, volcanic black glass, found in Turkey, found in the digs at Çatalhöyük, and these are 8,000 years old. 8,000 years, 3 times older than Rome, 6,000 years older than any church that stood in London before the Great Fire. Someone, 8,000 years before this morning, shaped a piece of black volcanic stone into an oval and polished it until it gave a reflection, and looked into it. The impulse to know what you look like is not a modern vanity. It is at least as old as the impulse to make art, which is as old as we've been able to look. Then bronze. Bronze mirrors are the mirror of the ancient world. Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, all of them polishing their copper tin alloy to a mirror finish. Bronze mirrors survive in the museums of your far future, though you don't know that. There are Egyptian bronze mirrors with handles in the shape of women. There are Greek bronze mirrors with decorated backs. There are Roman bronze mirrors sold at market stalls and buried with their owners and recovered from the ground centuries later. The Romans were deeply invested in mirrors, perhaps because the Romans were deeply invested in appearance. Pliny the Elder wrote about mirrors with a mixture of fascination and mild disapproval. He described women who spent too long at their looking glasses, which is the oldest recorded version of a complaint about women and vanity, which tells you that the complaint is older than mirrors being available to anyone except the wealthy, and therefore could not possibly be about vanity, and is actually about something else that men have never quite admitted to naming directly. The something else is, women needed to know what they looked like because what they looked like had consequences. The same consequences it has for you this morning, standing in front of Mrs. Alvington's Venetian looking glass. The consequence is that you will be judged by it. That the judgment will happen whether or not you have access to a good mirror. That having a good mirror is the difference between being able to manage the thing you're being judged on and being unable to manage it. And Pliny's vanity was women exercising the agency available to them to manage something that mattered to their survival. The Romans also made glass mirrors, not flat glass, which they hadn't perfected, but small glass balls filled with lead that gave a curved reflection of the person holding them. These were available at multiple price points, from the expensive to the merely modest. Women could own one without being wealthy. The reflection was small and curved and dark, but it was real glass, which was a step toward what you're living with now. After Rome, in the medieval period, bronze mirrors again, pewter mirrors, polished metal of various kinds. The glass technique was known but inconsistently applied. The Venetian industry, which would eventually produce the glass on Mrs. Alvington's dressing table, was only just beginning to develop. For most women, for most of the medieval period, the bronze or pewter mirror was the best available technology, and most women didn't own one of those either, and used water. There are records of women in medieval England using the backs of decorated plates to see themselves, the underside of a polished dish, the bright surface of a new copper bowl. Records of women consulting each other about their appearance in the same way Agnes consulted you this morning. A practical, matter-of-fact exchange of visual information. Records of women using small metal mirrors carried as jewellery, small convex mirrors set in pendants or brooches, showing the wearer a tiny, curved, complete version of their face. Useful enough that people were willing to spend money on it, which tells you how much they wanted it. You want it. This is not vanity. You're quite clear on this. You want to know what you look like because you need to know what you look like, because people are going to be judging you on it all day, and you need the same information they have, the same data about the thing being evaluated. You want to know about the spot on your chin, not because you're vain, but because it exists in the world, and other people can see it, and you can't. And not being able to see it puts you at a disadvantage you didn't choose and can't fix, but can at least try to work around with the tools available. These are the tools available. You finish the first section of mending, Josiah's trouser knee, the left one, a neat darning job that will last another month if he's careful, which, given the evidence of how the knee came to be torn in the first place, he will not be. And you move to the next thing. Early afternoon. The bells strike 2. The light has shifted. The low October angle that says the day is past its centre point and heading toward evening. Mrs. Alvington comes to find you in the sewing room. She does not often come to find you. You usually come to find her. The reversal is slightly unusual, and you set down your mending with the attention of someone who has learned that unusual things in this household tend to require more attention than usual. I'm going out this afternoon, she says. Visits. You'll come. This is instruction, not question. Yes, ma'am, you say. 2:30. Get ready. Getting ready for you. A better cap. You have 2, the everyday one and the better one, and outings get the better one. Switched out quickly in the attic room. Pins relocated from one to the other. A brush through the visible parts of your hair with the brush you keep for the purpose. A thing with some bristles missing from one corner but still functional. Your cloak, which hangs on the hook by the attic door. Your outdoor shoes. Same as the indoor ones, you don't have outdoor shoes and indoor shoes separately. But you've rubbed some tallow into the leather to waterproof them slightly, which helps. Before you go down, you do what you always do in the attic in the afternoon light. You position yourself by the small window. The window faces east, which means it gets the western afternoon light in directly, reflected off the back of the building across the courtyard. It's not strong, it's not ideal, but it's light and it's daylight, which is more truthful than candlelight and more revealing. You stand as close to the window as you can and you feel the light on your face, and you raise the small piece of polished tin, the piece you've been keeping in your apron pocket for 3 weeks, a piece cut from a tin lid by a tinsmith's apprentice on Wood Street, who charged you 1.50 for it, which is possibly the best 1.50 you've spent since arriving in London. And you look. The tin is about the size of your palm. You've polished it with a rag and a little vinegar the way the tinsmith told you to, and it gives you something. A tinny, slightly bluish version of your face, smaller than it should be because the tin is small, the colour tone shifted towards silver. But it's flat. Not perfectly flat. There's a slight bow in one corner, but more flat than copper, less curved than the back of a spoon. It shows you more of your face at once. What it shows you, the better cap is sitting correctly, front edge level. Your gown, you straightened the waist of it when you put on the cloak. The tension right now. Your face, the spot on your chin, known. Your eyes, the shadows under them slightly less dramatic than this morning's haberdasher's glass suggested. Or possibly the daylight is being slightly more kind. The overall impression, presentable, ready. You put the tin piece back in your apron pocket. You go down. They say, the people who write about such things, that a woman in the right light can see herself adequately in a still pond. They say that a polished shield in the hands of the old heroes could show a reflection. They say that there's a story. And you've heard this story from Bess, who heard it from someone who heard it from someone, about a woman in York who owns a piece of glass from the cathedral window, a piece knocked loose in a storm, and who keeps it angled in her window and uses it to check her appearance every morning. Whether or not this is true you can't know, but you believe it, because the impulse it describes is completely recognisable. People will make do. Mrs. Alvington is waiting in the front hall, already dressed for outdoors, her hood on and her cloak settled correctly, and her whole person presenting the image of a prosperous merchant's wife, going about her prosperous merchant's wife afternoon business. She looks at you briefly when you come down, a professional assessment, the same quick scan that she applies to everything in her household, and she seems satisfied, or at least not dissatisfied, which in her vocabulary is the same thing. You go out. Cheapside in the early afternoon is a different street from Cheapside in the morning. The morning is all urgency and set-up. The afternoon has settled into its rhythm, the sellers comfortable in their positions, the buyers circulating, the whole mechanism of commerce ticking over at a steady rate. The light is lower, the smell is different, less bakery, more general city, more of the accumulated smell of horses and commerce and people that builds over the course of the day. You walk behind Mrs. Alvington, which is the correct position, the position that indicates your role and your relationship to her role, the arrangement that tells anyone watching who is the mistress and who is the attendant, and walking slightly behind her, you have a clear view of the shop windows. You have become systematic about this. You have a map, not written down but maintained in your head, of which windows on which streets give you useful reflections at what times of day. The goldsmith's row on Cheapside, excellent in the mornings, useful in the afternoons if the clouds cooperate. The fine linen drapers on Poultry Street, which you pass on the way to Mrs. Alvington's friend. One window that faces south and catches the afternoon light at an angle that makes it almost mirror quality on a clear day. The apothecaries on Friday Street, useless, the glass too green and wavy, the interior too cluttered with bottles. You are conducting what you think of, privately, as a survey. The systematic catalogue of reflective opportunities, maintained in your head, updated when conditions change. This is not frivolity. This is practical intelligence, the same kind of information about the city that tells you which pump gives the least bad water and which crossing on Cheapside is navigable without ruining your shoes after rain. At the goldsmith's you slow slightly, appearing to look at the rings in the window, which is an entirely plausible thing to do. Everyone looks at the goldsmith's rings, and you check your reflection in the glass. The better cap is sitting well. The cloak hangs correctly. The afternoon light shows you a face that is tired and slightly pinched with cold, but not alarming. You walk on. The visit is in Poultry Street. Mrs. Alvington's friend, a Mrs. Chadwick, whose husband is in the insurance trade. A business you have gathered is both lucrative and slightly shameful, in a way that nobody's explained to you explicitly. The house is slightly grander than the Alvington house, the front room slightly more furnished, the kind of incremental one-upness that runs through all social interactions in this city, where every object in a room is also a statement about the person who owns it and the person who placed it there. You are taken below while the ladies talk above. The kitchen here is managed by a cook named Mrs. Hooper, a thin, energetic woman who seems to regard everything with a kind of controlled emergency. The kitchen always apparently on the verge of a crisis that she is permanently on the verge of averting. She gives you tea and a piece of the plain cake that she's made for the visitors upstairs, one piece which you accept with the gratitude it deserves. Plain cake is still cake, and you sit at the kitchen table, and you look at the wall. There is a looking glass on the kitchen wall, not large. About the size of two hands placed side by side, a rectangular shape, slightly lopsided in its frame, maybe a frame that was made for a slightly different piece of glass and which someone has forced this piece into anyway. The backing is deteriorating in one corner, a dark shadow where the mercury tin amalgam has separated from the glass, but the centre of it is clear, and the right-hand 3/4 of it show a true reflection. Mrs. Hooper follows your eyes. Family piece, she says, from the last house, before Mrs. Chadwick got the one upstairs. She means the kitchen received the old glass when the mistress upgraded. This is how kitchens get their looking glasses. They are the beneficiaries of the upward mobility of their mistresses. May I? You ask. Mrs. Hooper waves her hand. Be my guest, obviously. What are you waiting for? You stand before it. This is better than anything you've had today. Better than the haberdasher's spotted glass. Better than your tin piece. Better than the fleeting glimpses in shop windows. The centre of this glass is clear and flat, and it shows you your whole face, including your chin, including both eyes, including the full extent of the cap. What it shows you? Fine. Everything fine. The better cap holding exactly as it should. Your gown under the open cloak. The slight pulling at the hip is visible but not dramatically wrong. Your collar, straight. Your face, the spot is there, prominent, nothing to be done. Your eyes, grey-brown, more colour visible in this glass than in the spoon or the tin, a warmth in them that, you think, might be what people see when they look at you and decide you seem trustworthy. Or you're constructing that. You're possibly constructing that. You look at yourself for probably 90 seconds, which is a significant amount of time, and you feel the particular quality of attention that this glass allows. The ability to actually look at your own face as a whole rather than as a collection of fragments assessed one at a time. Useful, you say. Mrs. Hooper laughs, a short practical sound. Can't manage without it, she says. I had one at my last place, lost it when I moved. 3 months without and I was undone. Half the time getting here with my cap wrong and Mrs. Chadwick's face when she saw me. This is the calculus. 3 months without means. 3 months of arriving improperly presented because the alternatives are inadequate. 3 months of depending entirely on the network. Other women's eyes, shop windows, stolen moments in the back of a spoon, and finding it insufficient to prevent error. We're saving up, you say. Me and Bess, for a small French one. How far along, you tell her. She nods. Worth it, she says simply. Worth every penny. Upstairs, the visit continues. Downstairs, you drink your tea and eat your cake and think about looking glasses and the women who don't have them, which is most women, which has always been most women. The oldest account you know of a woman thinking about mirrors is from the Bible, from the book of Exodus, actually, though your theology is not precise enough to locate exactly where, and it mentions women's looking glasses, bronze mirrors brought by the women of Israel and used to make something for the temple. This is from centuries before your time, from a text that is older than anything else in common circulation, and even there, in that ancient account, the looking glasses are already assumed. Women already have them, already use them. The looking glass is not presented as a new technology. It's presented as something ordinary, something that women bring because, of course, women have looking glasses. This is how old the need is. Older than the text that first mentions it, which is already ancient. Older than the bronze that the text's women carried. Old as the impulse to ask, what do I look like? What does the world see when it looks at me? It is not a trivial question. It has never been a trivial question. It is a question that has driven the development of obsidian and bronze and glass and tin mercury amalgam and the glassworks of Venice and the manufacture at Saint-Gobain and the spies sent to steal the secrets and the assassinations in foreign cities. All of that, centuries of technology, decades of corporate espionage, deaths, because people wanted to see their own faces clearly. You want to see your own face clearly. You want it with a specificity and a persistence that you've learned to manage, that you've learned to redirect into the systems available, the tin piece, the shop windows, the network, because wanting a thing you don't have is only productive if it's pointed in a useful direction. The useful direction is save money, 6 more weeks, 7. The visit ends. Mrs. Alvington descends to the front hall. You come up from the kitchen, you go out. The afternoon is deepening toward evening now, the October light already beginning to fail. They go quickly, the autumn afternoons, the light contracting on both ends of the day, the dark arriving earlier each week. The walk back to Cheapside is in light that is softer and more golden than the morning. The low angle of the late afternoon sun doing something flattering to the upper stories of the buildings, even as it leaves the street level in increasing dimness. You walk behind Mrs. Alvington. You glance in windows. The goldsmith's windows are now reflecting the low light back at you in a way that makes them less useful as mirrors, but more beautiful as windows. A warm, reflected glow that turns the glass itself golden, and turns your reflection, briefly, into something that looks painted. A figure in a dark cloak walking on Cheapside in the autumn of 1693, briefly illuminated in the glass of a goldsmith's shop. This is you. This person walking in the late afternoon light. This is the version of yourself that other people see. The external you. The person made visible by being in the world and having the world reflect light off you and off the glass of various shop windows and off the polished surfaces of whatever is near enough to catch you. You've been in London 3 months, and this person, this external you, is becoming less strange to you, more knowable, not because you can see yourself more clearly, not yet, not until the looking glass in 7 weeks, but because you've been building the composite for 3 months, adding each piece as it comes to you, the tin piece and the shop windows and Agnes's eye, and Bess's honest assessment and the haberdasher's spotted glass and the cook's wall mirror and the glimpses over Mrs. Alvington's shoulder. And the composite is starting to cohere into something. You know your face in the way you know things you've never directly observed, through inference, through secondary evidence, through the testimony of people who have seen it. You know the spot on your chin with your finger. You know the grey-brown of your eyes from accumulated consensus. You know the cap sits straight because you've been corrected enough times to learn exactly how straight feels under your hands when you pin it. You know the set of your jaw from the Venetian mirror glimpse, the one true look, the 2 minutes when you stood before it with no one watching. You know yourself in fragments. It is remarkably enough. Back at the house, the evening begins to organise itself. The sounds of supper preparation coming from the kitchen, the particular clatter and steam and smell. You take Mrs. Alvington's outdoor things. You carry things up and down. You attend as attendance is required, and become usefully invisible when invisibility is the appropriate mode. By 6 the supper is ready, and by 6:30 the household has eaten. Upstairs their supper, the proper one, downstairs the servant's version, which tonight is mutton stew of yesterday's leftovers and bread from this morning, and beer that is mostly water but serves its purpose. You eat at the kitchen table with Bess and Thomas and Mrs. Palmer, who is standing at the counter as always, eating her supper there, attending to something on the fire between bites, never fully stopping. Bess has been in all day. One of the days when the work is all inside, the cleaning and the ironing and the upstairs rooms, and she's tired in the particular way of days that don't go outdoors, a kind of indoor tiredness that sits behind the eyes. She looks at you across the table. "You've got something on your chin," she says, matter of fact, not cruel. You put your finger to it. Not the spot. The spot is known, documented, constant, but just left of the spot, a smear of something, possibly from supper, possibly from earlier. "I know," you say, and deal with it with your handkerchief. "Better," she says. This is the end of the day's assessment, the last entry in the record, the final data point in the accumulated picture of how you appeared to the world today. After supper, the evening tasks, the dishes, the pots, the floor, the preparation for tomorrow. You and Bess work through it in the easy rhythm of practice, neither of you needing to direct the other, the work dividing itself by the logic of proximity and capability. The kitchen empties of steam and smell as the pots are cleaned. The fire is banked. The candles are managed. By 8, Mrs. Palmer has retired. Thomas has gone. The Alvingtons are in the front room, their evening sounds coming down to you as a muffled murmur of voices, the creak of a chair, the movement of someone who's reading or talking. Josiah has been sent to bed and hasn't stayed there, you can tell from the floor, from the light in the gap under his door. You and Bess sit by the kitchen fire. You have the tin piece. You've been taking it out of your pocket in the evenings, when there's a moment, and looking at it in the firelight. This is partly habit, and partly the same compulsion that sends you to check in any available surface throughout the day, the need to verify, to know, to accumulate another data point for the composite. In the firelight, the tin piece shows you something more golden and more orange than the daytime version. Everything is warmer. The shadows under your eyes are more dramatic in candlelight, which is the particular cruelty of candlelight. It makes people look simultaneously more romantic and more exhausted, the shadows more pronounced, the skin more golden, the whole effect more extreme in both directions. Bess sees the tin piece. "Still that thing," she says, "until we have better." She's working on a letter. Bess writes letters home. She's from Essex. from a family she misses, and she writes them in the evenings in the careful, deliberate handwriting of someone who learned to write as a gift rather than as a given. She writes slowly, and she writes everything, and she folds each letter very neatly when it's done. 6 weeks, you say? She looks up. The looking glass, from the haberdashers. 6 weeks, if we both save. She goes back to her letter for a moment. Then, if nothing breaks. If nothing breaks, you agree. Nothing breaks, meaning no one gets sick, no unexpected expense, no emergency of the kind that London is always producing. This is the eternal precondition of any financial plan at your level. If nothing goes wrong, if the world cooperates, if. You sit by the fire and you look at the tin piece and you think about Mrs. Alvington saying, another few years, perhaps. Common enough. You think about the cook in the Chadwick kitchen, 3 months without a looking glass, half the time getting there with her cap wrong. You think about Agnes touching your arm this morning on the street. Your cap. Quick and efficient. No ceremony. You think about the women back in Hinkton Green. Your mother with her pewter piece on the wall above the washstand, worn smooth and thin from years of looking. The reflection it gives a kind of brownish blur that your mother navigates by memory and touch. Your grandmother, who used a bowl of water in a dark room and called it her looking glass, which it was, which is what looking glasses were for almost everyone for most of human history. You think about the Venetian mirror in the oval frame, the flat, clear, true reflecting surface, what it gives you in those glimpses, the actual you, the you that exists in the world, the you that other people see. Bess finishes her letter. She folds it. She sets it with the others that will go out in the next few days to the carrier for Essex. Bed, she says. You put the tin piece in your apron pocket. You bank the fire. You put out the candles. You go up. The attic is cold in the way it is always cold. The cold that has been building in the walls all day while the house was being heated below, which reaches the attic as a general chill rather than warmth. You undress by feel, the cloak on its hook, the apron folded, the gown unhooked and folded, the petticoat, the stays unlaced with the familiar practised reach around your own back, the shift, which you sleep in, the cap, 3 pins, you count them going out, 3 pins laid in the dish. Your hair, released from the cap, falls to your shoulders. You run your fingers through it, working out the day's pins and the tension of being pinned, feeling the strands, checking for tangles. This is the last physical self-assessment of the day. Your own fingers on your own scalp, your own hair, your own skin. The assessment by touch of the thing you spent all day trying to see. Your hair is, you close your eyes, your fingers moving through it, clean enough. The ends are slightly dry. The back has a small tangle from the cap rubbing, nothing serious. The scalp is warm from being covered all day. You lie down, the straw mattress, Bess beside you, settling. The sounds of the house above and below, the Alvingtons' voices growing quieter, the creak of the building as the night cold works on the timbers. Outside, London continues. Cheapside at night is different from Cheapside by day, quieter but not silent. The cart traffic that is banned in the day now rolling freely over the cobblestones in the dark. The heavy delivery wagons bringing what the morning markets will sell. A church bell, St. Mary le Bow, marks the hour. 9, then past. The carters and the nighttime workers passing below, voices occasional, the sound of the city at its lowest pitch. You think, as you lie in the dark, about what you've assembled today. The basin at 5, a rough impression, untrustworthy. The copper pot, an oval of distorted orange-reddish self. The pewter spoon, your eyes close, in the small concave bowl of it. The shop window at the goldsmith's, a full-length impression, brief, the cap and the gown and the shape of you. The haberdasher's glass, your whole face spotted slightly, centre clear, enough to work with. The framed engraving at Mr. Hartley's, a good reflection, the glass unexpectedly clear. Agnes on the street, your cap, shifted, corrected. The Venetian mirror twice, the morning and the one held breath moment. Your face, actually, properly, the full account. The Chadwick kitchen glass. Another good look, the best outside Mrs. Alvington's bedroom. The goldsmith's window in the afternoon, a golden figure. The low light making an image more impressionistic than accurate. The tin piece at the window before going out, a quick check, serviceable. The tin piece now, in memory. The firelight version. This is what you know about yourself today. It is. You run through it. Sufficient. Not complete. Not what you'd have if you had a looking glass of your own, but sufficient for the day's purposes, for appearing correctly, or close enough to correctly that the errors were minor and caught and corrected, for managing the spot on your chin, which cannot be managed but can at least be known about, for getting through a day in London in 1693 as a woman without a mirror who has become very good at the work of knowing herself without one. The city below the window is making its night-time sound, lower and stranger than the day sound, the particular quality of a city at night that has less purpose in it, and more randomness. The sounds of people who are up at 9 at night not because work requires it, but because they choose to be. The taverns and the night walks and the carriers and the dark street transactions that have no name you're supposed to know. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your closed eyes is the same as the darkness of the room, except that one is outside you and one is inside, and both of them are complete. In the darkness behind your eyes you carry the composite, the assembled picture, not clear, not the flat Venetian clarity, but textured, layered, made of fragments that add up the way all knowledge is made of fragments that add up if you're patient enough to keep adding. You know your face, not perfectly, not the way you'd know it if you had a looking glass on the wall above the washstand and checked yourself in it every morning and every evening and whenever you passed by and wanted to. Not the way women will know their faces. You believe this. You believe Mrs. Alvington when she says another few years. When looking glasses become common enough that not having one is unusual rather than normal. But you know it in the way you know things you've had to work for, in the way the city becomes known to someone who arrived 3 months ago and has been learning it one street at a time, one shop window at a time, one correct turn and one wrong turn at a time. Not the knowledge of a map seen from above, complete and simultaneous. The knowledge of someone who walked it, who built it from the inside out, who assembled it piece by piece until it was recognizable from any point within it. 6 weeks, maybe 7. And then the small looking glass from the haberdasher's, spotted second-hand French, will be on the windowsill in the attic room, available in the mornings, available in the evenings, a reliable surface to return to instead of the rotation of approximations. It won't be Mrs. Alvington's looking glass. It won't be Venetian. It won't show you yourself with that particular flatness and clarity and completeness that the oval mirror in the gilded gesso frame provides, but it will show you enough. It will show you more than the spoon, and less than the Venetian mirror, and considerably more than the water in the basin. It will be yours. Bess is asleep already. Her breathing has gone slow and regular. The deep, rhythmic breathing of someone who falls asleep, the way some people fall into water. quickly, completely, no negotiation. You are nearly there. The thoughts slow. The composite of your face begins to soften at the edges. The tin piece version and the Venetian mirror version and the shop window version all merging into something that is simply your face, simply yourself, simply the person who has been doing the work of this day. The spot on your chin is still there in the composite, and it is still not manageable, and it is still there, yes, but it is your chin, your spot. You're not someone else's face but your own. You are warm enough, just enough. The blanket thin and the attic cold and the warmth of Bess beside you enough to take the edge off both. You're tired enough, very tired. The 5 o'clock morning and the 12 hours of work and the walking and the attending and the managing, it is all in your legs and your back and in the particular heaviness behind your eyes that is not quite sleep yet but is very close to it. You have enough. Not everything. Not the looking glass. Not yet. Not for 6 weeks. Not the certainty, the clean flat certainty, of seeing yourself clearly whenever you want to. Not the freedom from the daily work of assembling yourself in fragments and hoping the fragments are close enough, but enough to get through the day, enough to appear correctly or nearly, enough to know yourself or nearly, to have assembled the composite that the day required. This has always been the way. Women have always done this, have always assembled themselves from what was available, have always used the bronze mirror and the pewter plate and the dark water and the other women's eyes and the stolen glimpse in the mistress's looking glass, have always done the work of knowing themselves in fragments, in the margins of the day, with the tools available, which have never been quite adequate and have never stopped them. The city outside, the 500,000 people, the carters and the sellers and the watchmen and the gin drinkers and the merchants and the girls in other attics in other houses, all of them sleeping or trying to, or not yet trying, all of them carrying their own composites into the night, the assembled pictures of themselves that they've built from whatever mirrors the day provided. This is London. This is 1693. This is the October night settling over Cheapside and St. Mary le Bow and the river and all the streets, you know, by name now, and all the streets you haven't found yet, and all the shop windows and all the women who walk past them and check their caps and keep walking. Centuries will pass. The looking glasses will get cheaper. The techniques will spread. The French will make them in factories, and the factories will make them in greater quantities, and the prices will come down and down until one day, you can't imagine the exact form of this day, but you can feel its direction. One day a looking glass will be in every room of every house of every kind, and the question of what women used before they could afford a mirror will be so long forgotten that it will need explaining, the way everything long forgotten eventually needs explaining. These shop windows will still be there. Women will still check them, still slow their pace at the glass shops, still catch themselves reflected in train windows and phone screens and the dark glass of unlit buildings. The impulse is older than mirrors, older than glass, older than the longest memory. The impulse to know your own face will never stop. Only the tools will change. The network will still be there too, because women will keep looking at each other, will keep saying, your collar, your cap, you've got something on your chin, because some needs are met by tools and some needs are met by other people. And this particular need has always required both. But tonight, in the attic in 1693, none of that has happened yet. Tonight there is just the composite and the warmth of Bess beside you, and the sound of the city settling toward midnight, and the bells that ring over Cheapside with the patient persistence of things that have been marking time for centuries and will mark time for centuries more. Let sleep take you. Let the day's assembled fragments go. Let the tin piece and the haberdasher's glass and the goldsmith's window go. Let Mrs. Alvington's oval looking-glass go. The gilt gesso and the flat clear surface and the face you saw in it this morning. Clear, startling, actually yours. Let it all settle into the soft dark at the back of your mind where things are kept between uses. Tomorrow the bells ring at 5. Tomorrow the basin and the ice at the edges and the cold water on your face. Tomorrow the copper pot and the pewter spoon and the 3 pins in the cap, and the careful by-touch assembly of the person who goes out into the world. Tomorrow Agnes on the street, or someone like Agnes. Tomorrow the windows and the glances and the small corrections and the accumulating picture. Tomorrow, but not yet. You're warm enough and tired enough and known to yourself enough for now, for tonight, for this cold October night in 1693, when the city breathes its nighttime breath and the bells ring, and the fragmented picture of your face is in your hands like everything else you've learned to carry carefully. You are enough. This is enough. You have earned this rest. Take it. Let the darkness be soft. Let the sounds of Cheapside get further away, not because they're fading, but because you are. You are going down towards sleep the way you go down into any dark water. The sounds growing muffled, the thoughts growing lighter, the composite of the day dissolving into something simpler. You came here 3 months ago from Wiltshire with a letter in your apron and a very incomplete picture of what you were doing. The picture is more complete now. Not finished. It never finishes, you suspect, but more complete. The streets are in your feet. The shop windows are mapped in your head. The sound of the bow bells is almost familiar. The pewter spoon is in the 3rd drawer from the left, and in 6 weeks, perhaps 7, there will be a small looking glass on the windowsill. But tonight there is just this, the room, and the warmth, and the breathing of Bess beside you, and the city that never quite stops, and the bells that ring and ring and ring. Good night. But before the sleep comes the day, and before the day ends there is still the evening, and the evening in this city is its own country. Let me go back. Let me go back to the afternoon, to the gap between the Chadwick visit and the supper, because there is something that happened in that gap that I skipped over, something important enough to go back for. After the visit, after walking back through Cheapside in the low light, after Mrs. Alvington retired to the front room and the afternoon arrangements had been made, you had an actual hour, not stolen, not borrowed, not leveraged out of a moment when the house was distracted. A genuine hour in which Mrs. Palmer didn't need you, and Mrs. Alvington wasn't calling, and Thomas was doing the heavier work in the storeroom with Mr. Alvington's instructions, and Josiah was at his lessons with the neighbour's tutor. An hour. Bess found you at the bottom of the stairs with the expression of someone who has information. "There's a glass shop," she said, "on Friday Street, past the apothecaries. I heard Mrs. Palmer mention it to the housekeeper. They've got small glasses." You knew which street Friday Street was. You knew most streets within a 10-minute walk by now. And you knew the apothecaries, the one with the useless green wavy glass that showed you nothing useful. Past the apothecaries. "How small?" you asked. "Small, she said. "Handheld ones, and fixed ones, various sizes." She said this with a particular careful neutrality that meant she was interested, and didn't want to seem too interested, in case the thing turned out to be impossible. "We've got an hour," you said. She already had her cloak on. Friday Street in the afternoon is quieter than Cheapside, a secondary street. The businesses there serving the businesses on the main road in the way that smaller streets always serve the larger ones, the suppliers and the tradespeople who aren't on the frontage but who keep the frontage running. The apothecary's is at the corner, its green glass windows useless for reflection, but interesting for everything else. The bottles inside, brown and blue and clear glass arranged by size. The dim interior where a boy was grinding something in a mortar with the rhythmic patience of someone who has been grinding things for a long time. Past the apothecary's. The glass shop had no sign outside, or rather it had a small one. A painted board with a looking-glass painted on it, which seemed efficient in its directness. The window, and the window was a demonstration of what the shop sold, the window was the advertisement, showed several looking-glasses propped against small wooden stands, facing outward, and when you looked at the window you saw yourself reflected back from 3 or 4 different glass surfaces at once, a multiplication of yourself, slightly different angles from each, your face appearing in miniature in each one from the street. You stopped. Bess stopped beside you. You stood on Friday Street and you looked at yourselves in the shop window, which was itself a display of looking-glasses reflecting the street back at itself, a slightly dizzying arrangement where the outside world was reproduced inside the shop and from there projected back outward. So you were looking at a reflection of you looking at looking-glasses. "Come on," Bess said, and pushed the door. Inside, the smell. Something chemical, faintly sharp. The particular smell of the tin mercury amalgam, which you didn't know the name of, but which you would come to recognise over the next few weeks as the smell of looking glass itself, the smell of the reflective surface in its natural environment before it's entirely settled. It's not strong, the shop is well aired, the shopmaster knows his business, but it's there. Underneath it, wood, sawdust, the smell of the frames being made in the back. The shopmaster was a spare man of about 60, with the dry, careful hands of someone who works with precision in delicate materials. He looked at you both with the evaluating glance of a tradesman. What are they? What do they want? What can they spend? And settled on an expression of neutral helpfulness, which is the expression of a man who has decided that you might buy something small, but probably won't buy anything large, and will nonetheless get the same standard of information because you might come back. "Good afternoon," he said. "Good afternoon," you said. "We're looking at the smaller glasses, for personal use." He nodded. He went to the shelves. The shop was not large, maybe 20 feet by 15, but it was full. Glasses hung from hooks and propped in stands and lay in padded boxes on shelves, and each one showed a different size and quality of reflection. The shop itself becoming a kind of hall of mirrors, you and Bess reflected from every angle simultaneously, which created a strange effect of there being many of you, many Marys and many Besses, all slightly different, none of them quite the same person as the others. "This is the most I've ever seen of myself," Bess said quietly, looking at the walls of reflection. "I know," you said. The small glasses came in 3 grades, the shopmaster explained. The least expensive, hand-held, about the size of a large spoon bowl set in a bone handle. These were made with French glass. He was honest about this, or at least he didn't misrepresent it, and the quality was variable. Some were clear, some had slight wavy distortions, some had the speckling in the backing that the haberdasher's glass had. You picked up 2 of them, one in each hand, and held them up and looked at the centre of each where the reflection was most accurate. The first, slightly wavy at the left edge, clear in the centre. The centre was good enough. It showed you your face, the right size, the right proportions without the distortion of the spoon, clearly enough that you could make out the spot on your chin and the grey-brown of your eyes and the set of your cap in the centre portion. The second, clearer still, almost no waviness. The backing had a small shadow in the upper right corner, a spot where the amalgam had separated from the glass over time. This was second-hand, you realised, looking at it, but the lower 3/4 were clear. He named price. You didn't wince visibly. You'd learned not to wince visibly. But the price was, it was 2 weeks' wages for the better one. Not 6 weeks, not the combined savings you and Bess had calculated. 2 weeks each, if you both contributed, which was more possible than you'd thought. The second one, you said, the second hand. Good glass still, he said. Second hand doesn't mean inferior. The glass itself is French work, from Saint-Gobain's manufactory, 15 years old at most. The backing has 20 more years in it at least, excepting the corner you can see already separated. Plenty of use in it. You and Bess looked at each other. 2 weeks combined savings, not 6. The calculation had been based on a fixed glass, a wall-mounted one. The handheld was different, cheaper, and for your purposes possibly better, because the handheld could be taken to the window, could be angled to the best light, could be moved rather than requiring you to move yourself in front of it. "Can we have a day to consider?" you asked. "It'll be here," he said, without urgency, without the performance of demand. This was either generosity or the quiet confidence of a man who knows that people who come into his shop wanting a looking-glass come back. Because looking-glasses are not an impulse purchase. They're an expression of a need that has been building for a long time. A need that doesn't go away just because you walk out the door. You walked out the door. On Friday Street in the October afternoon, you and Bess walked in silence for a moment. 2 weeks, she said. A bit more than 2. 2 and some days. Still, she thought. Still much less than we thought. You thought about the second-hand glass with the shadow in the upper right corner, the centre clear, the lower 3/4 clear, the left side and the bottom solid. That was, if you held it at the right angle, angled slightly away from the shadow corner, that was more than enough. That was a real reflection. That was you, clearly in the morning, before you went up to Mrs. Alvington's room. "Next week," you said. "If we're careful." Bess didn't answer immediately, but she was smiling slightly, the particular smile of someone recalculating a future they thought was further away than it turns out to be. "Next week," she agreed. You walked back to Cheapside in the late afternoon light, and the weeks did pass. They passed in the way weeks pass when you're working very hard and learning a great deal, and the city is enormous and every day offers something new to absorb. They passed in the rhythm of the household, the 5 o'clock bells and the morning water and the careful assembly of yourself in the dark and the stairs and Mrs. Alvington's room and the Venetian mirror and the morning errands and the afternoon tasks and the supper and the banking of the fire and the attic and the dark. They passed in the changing of the light. October gave way to November and the mornings became darker, which you hadn't thought was possible but turned out to be. The mornings of November in London are a specific kind of dark, heavy and yellow-tinged from the coal smoke that doesn't disperse in the cold air. The morning dark thicker and more persistent. The sun arriving later and seeming more reluctant. They passed in the changes to the street. The street vendors' wares shifted with the season. The fresh fruit of October giving way to the root vegetables of November. Turnips and parsnips and the hard cabbages that keep through cold weather. the hot potato man appearing at his corner with a charcoal brazier and potatoes wrapped in rags, and a small crowd around him in the mornings from people who wanted to warm their hands as much as they wanted the food. You learned things. You learned that the cap, pinned correctly with the right number of pins in the right places, will stay straight through an entire day of physical work, and the right number of pins is 4, not 3. You'd been using 3, and the correction Agnes made to your cap that morning on Cheapside was the correction that taught you. 4 pins, 2 at the temples, 2 toward the back. 4 pins and it holds. You learned that the copper pots in the kitchen, the large ones, can be angled toward the window in the morning if you position them on the kitchen table rather than hanging them, and at the right angle to the window light they give you a surprisingly usable reflection. More distorted than a flat glass, yes, but wide enough to see your whole face at once, and sometimes wide is more useful than flat. You learn to read Mrs. Alvington's face for information. The slight tightening around her eyes that means something in your work has displeased her. The particular set of her mouth that means the opposite. Approval, expressed in negative space. The absence of criticism being the nearest she gets to praise. You learn to use this as a tool the way you used everything else as a tool. She was seeing you clearly. She was looking at you with the frank evaluating eye of someone who had a Venetian mirror on her dressing table, and was accustomed to the flat truth of reflection, and if your appearance was wrong she would register it, and if she registered it she would eventually say something, and if she said nothing then you were, probably, all right. You learned which women on which streets would tell you something if it needed telling. The lavender seller on the corner of Poultry Street who had no stake in the Alvington household and no reason to flatter you, who would glance at you as you passed and sometimes say, in the flat informational tone of a woman who has been doing this for years, your collar, or your hair at the back, or once with what you thought might have been sympathy. You've got something on your chin, love, which was the spot. Always the spot, which by that point was fading but still present, still the most reliable piece of information about your face that required no mirror to determine. You learned the windows, more of them. The widow on Milk Street who polished her front window every Thursday morning until it gave a reflection almost as good as a glass. Not quite, the glass slightly wavy, but the morning light on Thursdays hit it at exactly the right angle. The tailor's shop on Cheapside where the large front window faced north and gave a consistent reflection regardless of time of day, because north-facing glass doesn't get direct sunlight to wash it out. You learned Bess's tells. The way her eyebrows did a small thing when she looked at you and found something wrong but wasn't sure whether to mention it. A very slight rise and then fall, the thought and the reconsideration. You learned to ask, when you saw the eyebrow move, what? And she would tell you, and you would fix it. 2 weeks after the visit to the glass shop on a Saturday when the household accounts were being done, and neither of you were needed until the late afternoon, you and Bess walked together to Friday Street. The shopmaster remembered you, not by name, you hadn't given names, but by the specific interest you'd shown in the second-hand handheld glass with the shadow in the upper right corner, which was, you found when you arrived, still on the shelf in the same place, which was either evidence that he'd held it for you, or evidence that not many people had come in for handheld second-hand glasses in the past 2 weeks, and you suspected the latter. He wrapped it in a piece of cloth while you counted out the coins. The coins were from both of you, pulled from whatever margins your wages and your careful management allowed, and you had enough, and there was a penny extra that you left on the counter because it seemed right, a gesture towards something you couldn't name, toward the fact that this small-looking glass was going to matter quite a lot. He nodded. No ceremony. He'd sold a great many things in this shop. You walked back to Cheapside with the glass wrapped in cloth inside Bess's cloak, which was warmer than your cloak, and therefore the better choice for protecting something delicate. You unwrapped it in the attic room in the afternoon light from the east-facing window. Just the two of you, and the small glass, and the light. You held it up first. It was still yours more than Bess's in that first moment, the first look belonging to the one who initiated the search, some unspoken rule of priority, and you angled it toward the window. Your face. Not the glimpse over Mrs. Alvington's shoulder. Not the edge of the eye stolen second. Your face, centered in a glass that was yours, held at your preferred angle, in the light you'd chosen for as long as you wanted to look. The shadow in the upper right corner was there, as promised, but the centre, the left, the lower 3/4, clear enough. Your eyes, grey-brown, with the green in them that you'd seen in Mrs. Alvington's Venetian mirror and hadn't quite believed, but here it was again, confirmed. A warmth toward green in the outer edge of the iris. Your jaw, strong, the slight squareness you'd first identified in the Venetian glass, now familiar, now simply yours. Your cap, 4 pins straight, the November morning having so far not disturbed it. The spot on your chin, almost gone. Not quite, still a slight redness, but the worst of it had passed in the past week, and in this glass, in this light, the redness was barely visible. You looked at yourself for a long time. There is no other way to say it. You looked at yourself for a long time, longer than any single look you'd had before, longer than the 2 minutes in Mrs. Alvington's bedroom, longer than the 90 seconds in the Chadwick kitchen. Long enough to stop feeling startled by the clarity, long enough to stop doing the automatic assessment, cap, collar, spot, and just look. You looked at the person you were becoming, not the girl who'd stepped off the wagon from Wiltshire with a letter and no idea. Not quite that person anymore. Not the complete Londoner either, not yet. Something in between, as you'd thought before. Something that was still forming, but with more shape to it than it had 3 months ago. More specificity, more recognition. You handed the glass to Bess. She held it up. She looked at herself. Her expression went through something. Recognition, surprise, reassessment, and then settled into something quieter. The look of someone arriving somewhere they've been trying to reach. She looked for a while. Then she lowered the glass and sat on the edge of the mattress and held it in her lap. "Good glass," she said. "Very good glass," you agreed. You were thinking about the shopmaster wrapping it. The penny you'd left on the counter. The walk back through the November streets with the glass inside Bess's warmer cloak. You were thinking about the women who would never have this. The women further down the scale. The women in the worst parts of the city where even a second-hand handheld glass was out of reach. The women who would spend their whole lives relying entirely on the network, on other women's eyes, on the back of spoons and the surface of water. The women whose caps would go uncorrected more often than yours would. Not because the network wasn't there, but because it couldn't catch everything. Because it wasn't there all the time. In the mornings in the dark when the assembly happened. In the evenings when the reassessment needed to happen. You were thinking about Mrs. Alvington saying, "Another few years, perhaps. Common enough. You already had one. You were already ahead." You set the glass on the windowsill in the corner where the light was best. From then on, the morning ritual changed, not dramatically. The bell still rang at 5, and you still woke in the dark, and you still found your clothes by touch, and you still pinned the cap with 4 pins by feel. All of that was the same. The body's knowledge, assembled over months, didn't stop being necessary just because you now had a glass. But after the wash, after the cold water and the checking with your hands and the drying, you held up the glass, and you looked, and you knew, and the knowledge, having it, actually having it, the flat, clear knowledge rather than the assembled fragments, was so ordinary in practice, so immediate and so simple, that you understood for the first time why the absence of it had required so much compensating work. You understood it the way you understand a burden when you've put it down, in the sudden absence of the effort. The spot on your chin, fully healed now, showing nothing. Your cap straight. You could see it, no need to estimate. Your collar, good. Your eyes, grey-brown green, still consistently every morning. Good morning. The weeks continued to pass and winter arrived properly. London in winter is its own thing, distinct from London in autumn in ways that are both obvious. The cold, the dark, the ice, and subtle. The coal smoke in winter becomes a different quality of coal smoke, thicker, more persistent, the cold air trapping it at street level rather than letting it rise, so that Cheapside in the mornings of December and January has a particular yellow-grey quality to its air, and the smell of it is heavier, closer, like breathing inside something rather than breathing outside it. You adapted. You'd been adapting since October, and the adaptation continued. More layers under the gown, stockings repaired and re-repaired, because stockings that let in cold are quickly debilitating when you're moving through December streets. A piece of wool around your neck under the collar, not visible, not affecting your presentation, just warmth. The discovery that cold hands make pinning your cap harder, the fingers less sensitive in the cold, the feedback from the pins less reliable, and the countermeasure, holding your hands over the banked fire in the kitchen for 2 minutes before doing the pinning. Just enough warmth to restore the sensitivity. You adapted the glass use. In winter, the light from the east-facing attic window was worse. The sun further south, the angle lower, the light less direct. And you learned to hold the glass toward the kitchen fire in the mornings rather than the window. The fire giving enough light to confirm the basics of your appearance even in the dark December mornings. Firelight distorted the colours, everything went warm and golden, but position and arrangement could be assessed by firelight even when colour couldn't. And Mrs. Alvington noticed the glass, not in the morning, not catching you using it in the attic, but in some other way, the way a household notices when something in it has changed, the slight efficiency improvement in how you presented yourself at her bedroom door, the reduction in the small corrections she had occasionally offered. Something had shifted, and whatever she saw in you she filed under, sorted. She said nothing about it. Of course she said nothing about it. But once, coming back from the morning's preparations, passing you on the stairs, she on her way down, you on your way up with the morning's linens, she paused briefly. She looked at you directly, a real look. "You're settling in," she said. Not a question. "Yes, Mum," you said. She continued down the stairs. This was, you unpacked it later, in the attic in the small glass. This was the highest compliment Mrs. Alvington had offered you since you arrived. Settling in, finding your shape here, becoming the person this role required, in a way that she could see. You were becoming that person. The composite was no longer just a daily act of assembly. It was starting to feel like a self, like something that existed continuously, rather than being reassembled from scratch each morning. Like the difference between building a structure and living in one, the building is always construction, always conscious effort, always the worry about whether the pieces will hold. Living in it is less work. It's still work. Everything in 1693 is work. But it's different work. The work of maintenance rather than construction. And maintenance is less exhausting than building, even when it's constant. You were becoming a Londoner. January, the river froze. Not all the way across. The Thames is wide and tidal here, and a full freeze requires conditions more sustained than this particular winter provided. But along the edges, in the slack water near the wharves, the water froze to a thickness that the bolder souls tested by walking on it, and the bolder souls' verdict was solid enough. Frost fairs had happened on the Thames before. The great one of 1684 was still in living memory. The river frozen solid bank to bank, the ox roasted on the ice, the printing presses set up on the ice, the carnival that the Londoners made of disaster in the particular way that Londoners do. And this year's freeze was not enough for a frost fair, but was enough for the ice to be talked about, to be part of the morning conversation, to be the thing that Thomas reported on when he came in from the yard. "Edges solid past the bridge," he said. 6 inches, they're saying. 6 inches isn't a frost fair, Mrs. Palmer said. It's not nothing. You went to see it on the Sunday when Mrs. Alvington attended church and Josiah attended with her, and you and Bess had the hours that servants get on Sundays, which are not quite your own, but are closer to your own than any other hours in the week. You went to the river. The smell of the Thames in winter is different from the Thames in autumn. Less rotting, the cold having suppressed the biological activity that makes the river smell so aggressively of itself in the warmer months. In January the river smells of cold and iron and the slight sweetness of ice forming, a crystalline smell that is not quite like anything else. The ice along the bank was blue-white in the winter light, and in it, in the absolutely still, perfectly frozen surface of the trapped water near the bank, was a looking-glass, not a metaphor, an actual reflective surface, the clearest, most accurate, most precisely flat natural mirror available to you in London in January 1693. You knelt on the frozen bank, the ground was solid, the mud had been frozen for a week and was concrete underfoot, and you looked at yourself in the ice, and the ice showed you yourself with a clarity that no mirror you'd used so far could match, not even the second-hand handheld glass from Friday Street. The ice was absolutely flat, absolutely still, and the winter light, low and silver, and coming in at a flat angle, hit the surface at exactly the angle that produced the clearest reflection. Not the angled light that creates brightness, but the flat light that creates clarity. You saw yourself in the January ice, and what you saw was exact. Every detail. The fine lines at the corners of your eyes from squinting against cold and wind. The particular way your hair escaped at your left temple where the cap never quite contained it fully. The cap itself, straight, four-pinned. The collar, your breath making a small cloud between your face and the ice, disturbing the surface slightly with the warmth of it. Bess knelt beside you and looked into the ice and was quiet for a moment. "Better than the glass," she said. "Better than the Venetian mirror," you said. And you meant it. The ice didn't last. The temperature rose at the end of January, and the edge ice broke up and floated away, and the river was itself again, opaque, tidal, brown-grey and moving. The clearest mirror in London disappeared with the frost, but you held the memory of it, the image of yourself in January ice, the exact version, and you thought about the women who had always done this, who had found a frozen pond or a still pool or a glass calm estuary on a cold morning, who had knelt in the mud or the frost to see themselves clearly for a moment before the wind disturbed the surface. The women who had planned their routes on cold mornings past specific ponds, who had known, as you know now, the map of where to find the clearest versions of themselves. February, then March, the light coming back. The change of the light in London in March it's like the city taking a breath, like something that has been held very tight for 4 months slowly releasing. The morning dark retreats slightly each week, not by much, but enough to feel, enough to register. The 5 o'clock bells arriving in a slightly less absolute dark. The kitchen fire catching in a slightly less profound cold. By mid-March, the east-facing attic window gives real light by 6:30. Real morning light rather than the near dark of November and December. And the glass on the windowsill gives you a clear reflection in the actual daylight for the first time since the autumn. You look at yourself in March light and you see someone who has been in London since October. You see winter in your face, the slight dryness that the coal smoke air does to skin over months, the slight deepening of the crease between your brows from squinting against cold. You see someone who is not 16 the way she was 16 in October. The number is the same, but the person is different. You're becoming someone in particular. This is what months do. Not dramatic transformation, no fairy tale, no sudden revelation. Just the slow accumulation of who you're becoming, deposit by deposit, each week adding its layer, each experience adding its information, until one morning you look in the handheld glass in the March light and you don't see a girl from Wiltshire trying to become a Londoner. You see a Londoner who came from Wiltshire. The composite has cohered. It is spring, and you know yourself. And this is what I want to tell you about, as we go towards sleep, about what this knowing means. Not just the practical knowing, the cap straight, the collar right, the face accessible and manageable, the other kind. The kind that doesn't come from looking at yourself in a glass at all, that only becomes visible in retrospect once you've done the work. Because here is the thing about mirrors, about looking glasses, about all the surfaces that women have used since the obsidian ones in Turkey 8,000 years ago. They tell you what you look like. They do not tell you who you are. These are different things. They overlap at the edges. What you look like is part of who you are, is an expression of it, is how the world reads you before you've had a chance to speak. But they are not the same thing. The composite you've been building, the one assembled from pewter spoons and copper pots and shop windows and Agnes's eye and Bess's honesty and Mrs. Palmer's critical evaluations and Mrs. Alvington's mirror and the handheld glass and the January ice. That composite tells you what you look like. It tells you the cap is straight. It tells you the spot was there and is now gone. It tells you your eyes are grey-brown-green and your jaw is square and you look tired when you haven't slept. What you look like, who you are, is assembled from other composites, other fragmentary evidence, other accumulated data. Who you are is what Mrs. Alvington meant when she said, "You're settling in." It's what you mean when you think in March that the Bowbells feel familiar. It's the way your feet know the streets without your mind directing them. It's the 4 pins, not 3, and the third drawer from the left, and the goldsmith's windows in the morning light, and Agnes, and the way you can navigate the afternoon Cheapside crowd now. The shoulders turned slightly sideways, without thinking about it. You don't need a mirror to see that. You need the months. You needed the months. You have the months now. You have March, and the returning light, and the Cheapside you know, and the household you understand, and the small glass on the attic windowsill that cost you 2 weeks' combined wages and sits in the corner where the light is best. You have this, and tonight, this particular night, the night we're going toward, tonight there is a fire in the kitchen, and Bess with her letters, and you with the glass in the firelight, and the city outside its nighttime self, and the cold March air coming through the gap at the attic window that you've been meaning to stuff with something for weeks. The glass in the firelight shows you the warm-toned, slightly dramatic candlelight version of yourself. The version that looks like it should be painted. This version is an exaggeration in the way that candlelight exaggerates everything. The shadows deeper, the warmth more golden, the whole impression more intense. You know this. You know to adjust for it. You know that the you in the morning window is more accurate than the you in the firelight, and the you in the January ice was the most accurate of all, and the you in Mrs. Alvington's Venetian mirror is somewhere between these. Clear but warm, accurate but slightly flattering. You know all these versions now. You know that you are the sum of them, that no single surface tells you the whole truth, but that the accumulation of surfaces over time builds towards something close enough. You lower the glass. Bess is folding her letter. The fire has settled lower, the coal giving it steady red heat without the jumping flame of earlier. Outside, Cheapside is quiet in the way it gets quiet at this hour. Not silent, but reduced. The nighttime sounds replacing the daytime sounds with different sounds, less purposeful, stranger. Bed, she says. Bed, you agree. You bank the fire. You put out the candles. You go up. The attic is cold. March cold is different from January cold. It has something in it, some approaching quality, some sense of being on the far side of the worst rather than the front side. A cold that is retreating rather than advancing. Still cold. Still the thin blanket and Bess's warmth beside you. Still the straw mattress and the windowsill where the glass sits in the corner. You take the glass down before you lie down. You set it on the windowsill, safe there, not going to fall, positioned where you'll find it in the morning when the light comes through. In the dark, it's just a small rectangle of glass giving back nothing, because glass without light gives back nothing. Light is the necessary ingredient. Glass is only the instrument. You lie down, you close your eyes. The city at night, the low continuous presence of it, the breath of a city that never fully stops, the cartwheels and the distant voices, and somewhere a door closing and somewhere else a dog. The church bell from St. Mary le Bow marking the hour with its patient repetition. The bell that has been marking the hours over Cheapside since before anyone alive today was born. The bell that was marking the hours when this city was smaller, when these streets were different, when the women who walked these streets used bronze mirrors or pewter plates or dark water in clay bowls. The same impulse, different tools, always the same impulse, to know what you look like, to have, in a world that judges you on your appearance, the same access to information about that appearance that everyone who looks at you already has, to close the gap between the self that you are inside and the self that moves through the world outside, between the invisible internal experience of being you and the visible external fact of your face. The gap has been closing. It's not closed. It will never be fully closed, because even with a perfect mirror, there is still the gap between the image and the meaning, between the face and the person, but it has been closing. The October fragments have added up. The composite has cohered. You're more knowable to yourself than you were. This is enough. This is actually enough. Not everything you'd want. You'd want Mrs. Alvington's Venetian mirror in the right light every morning for as long as you wanted to look. You'd want the January ice always available. You'd want to know yourself with the completeness that perfect light and perfect glass could give. But you don't have perfect light and perfect glass, and you've gotten here anyway. To March and the cohered composite and the morning glass on the windowsill and the 4-pin cap and the network of women who check what the glass can't always check. You've gotten here. The city gets quieter still. Not silent, never silent, but the particular quality of 2 in the morning arrives gradually. The sounds spreading further apart, the gaps between them longer, the background level dropping by small degrees until the city is as quiet as it gets, which is still not very quiet, but is quiet enough. You are warm enough, tired enough, known enough to yourself for this night, for this Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is, for this particular day's work of appearing in the world with reasonable accuracy despite the limited tools, for this particular version of the thing that women have been doing since the bronze mirrors of ancient Egypt and the obsidian mirrors of Turkey 8,000 years ago. Let the day settle. Let the fragments cohere into the composite that tomorrow will require you to build again from the beginning. The 5 o'clock bells and the basin and the copper pots and the pewter spoon and the 4-pin cap by feel in the dark and the small glass in the corner of the windowsill. Let the Venetian mirror go, the oval in the gilt gesso frame, not yours, borrowed, glimpsed rather than owned. It will be there tomorrow. You will see yourself in the edge of it tomorrow, over Mrs. Alvington's shoulder, while you dress her hair. Let the shop windows go, the goldsmiths and the tailors and the framed engraving at Mr. Hartley's and the widow's Thursday polished window on Milk Street. Let Agnes and Bess and Mrs. Hooper and the lavender seller on Poultry Street go. The whole network, the women who are the infrastructure, the women who see you when you can't see yourself. You'll have them all tomorrow. They'll all be there tomorrow. The composite rebuilding itself in the morning light, the fragments coming together again into the person who walks through Cheapside knowing which windows to look in and which drawer the spoon is in and how many pins the cap needs and what her face looks like when she's tired versus when she's frightened versus when she's just spent 2 minutes in front of a Venetian looking glass that isn't hers and found herself clearer than she expected. Tomorrow. But for now there is just this. The attic room and the March cold and Bess breathing beside you, and the glass on the windowsill and the bells of St. Mary le Bow fading into the sound of the city at night, which is the sound of 500,000 people breathing, a sound so large you can't hear it as sound, but can only feel it as presence. This city breathes. You are part of its breath. The girl from Wiltshire who couldn't find herself in the dark, she's still here, still in there somewhere. She doesn't go away entirely, but she's sharing the space now with someone who knows the streets and knows the windows and knows the pins and knows her own face in winter light and firelight and the light of January ice and the edge of a Venetian mirror at 7:30 in the morning. She's sharing the space with a Londoner. Let it come. Let sleep come in the way it comes when you've earned it. Not fought for, but surrendered to. Not the sleep of someone who has given up, but the sleep of someone who has done what the day required, and who trusts that the day tomorrow will offer the same opportunity to do it again. Let the composite rest. Let the fragments rest. Let the woman you're becoming rest. Centuries will pass. These streets will change their shape. These buildings will fall and be rebuilt and fall again. The Great Fire is already history by this morning. It happened 27 years before your birth. But it made this London, this post-fire London of brick and wider streets, and the wren churches rising in the places where the old ones burned. And this London will change too, will become something that people in your time would barely recognise, would navigate by different landmarks, would understand by different systems. The Bow bells will still ring. The bells of St. Mary le Bow will ring across Cheapside for centuries more, ringing for Londoners born in their sound, ringing for the hours and the quarters, marking the city's time in the same patient way they're marking it now, above you, through the wall, through the sleep. The looking glasses will change, French mirrors, becoming cheaper, becoming more common, becoming eventually not a luxury at all. The mercury tin backing eventually replaced when the science catches up to what the glassmaker's trembling hands already knew, replaced with silver, safer, cleaner. The glass itself, flatter and clearer with each generation of technique, until the flat glass is simply what glass is, simply what you look into every morning without thinking about the human labour and the industrial espionage and the centuries of women improvising with whatever surfaces they could find. Women will still have this network, will still look at each other, will still say, your collar, your hair at the back. The impulse that drives Agnes to touch your arm in the morning street is older than mirrors and will outlast them. It is the impulse of women moving through a world that assesses them, helping each other move through it with the information required. This never goes away. Some things don't go away. They need to know what you look like, the need for other people to tell you what they see, the gap between the inside self and the outside face, the gap that every surface humans have ever polished has been trying to close. Sleep now. The bells are ringing something. You're too tired to count the strokes. The composite is assembled. Mary Sutton of Hinkton Green, 6 months into being someone else, someone still assembling, someone who has the small glass now, and the 4-pin cap, and the network, and the months, who has the thing she needs to move through the city as herself, presenting herself correctly, knowing herself as well as tools allow, and trusting the gaps to the women who see her when she can't see herself. This is enough. This is always what there is. The tools that exist and the people who help with the rest. Sleep now. Good night. But I've skipped something. I've skipped the street. I've told you about the mornings and the household and the glass on the windowsill and the months passing, and I've barely told you about what the street is, what Cheapside is, what it means to move through it every day as a young woman who's trying to know what she looks like and also trying to buy thread and collect bread and deliver messages and not be run over by a cart. Let me tell you about the street. Cheapside in October 1693 is one of the widest streets in London, which means it is wide enough for 2 carts to pass each other if both drivers are paying attention, and neither of them has animals that are behaving badly. That is the width of a wide street in 1693. It is also the main commercial road in the city, the road that connects the Guildhall to St. Paul's, the road that has been a market since before the Normans, the road whose name comes from the Old English word seep, which means trade or market. Cheapside means market street, and it is exactly that, the most concentrated market street in the most commercially intensive city in England. What this means practically, there are no sidewalks. Not really. Some of the better maintained sections have raised footpaths along the sides, stone-edged, slightly elevated above the street surface, giving you a few inches of protection from the cart traffic. But most of Cheapside is shared space, pedestrians and horses and carts and sedan chairs and dogs, and occasionally livestock, all of it moving through the same space at different speeds and with very different ideas about right of way. You learn the rules. First rule, assume nothing will stop for you. Horses do not stop for pedestrians in 1693 London. Carts do not stop. Sedan chairs, the enclosed boxes carried on poles by two men, the taxis of the era, will stop if the men carrying them don't want to knock you down. But they don't always stop because the men carrying them are in a hurry and you are in the way. Assume you must move. Always assume you must move. Second rule, the centre of the street is for faster traffic. The edges are for pedestrians, but the edges are also where the water runs, or doesn't run. In the technical sense, the street drains toward a channel in the middle, but what actually accumulates along the edges is everything that falls off the buildings above, and everything that washes from the street surface, and everything that the horses contribute to the ambience, which is considerable. The edge is safer from traffic and worse for your shoes. Third rule, the gutter is in the middle. When it rains, which it does regularly with the conviction of an English autumn, the centre of Cheapside becomes a river of whatever is in the street, which is water, horse dung, kitchen waste thrown from upper windows, rotting vegetable matter from the market stalls, the occasional dead rat, and in certain spots the specific, unidentified black liquid that accumulates in old cities and has probably been there since the Romans. You learn to jump the gutter. You learn where the crossing stones are, flat raised stones set at intervals across the worst gutters, placed by some merciful authority or some wealthy resident who got tired of ruining their shoes. And you learn which crossings have good stones and which have stones that have settled wrong and will rock under your weight and spray the gutter water onto the person crossing behind you. You learn this the way you learn everything in London, by getting it wrong first and then doing it differently. And all of this, the dodging of carts and the gutter jumping and the crossing stone navigation and the shoulder turned sideways crowd technique, all of this happens while you're also keeping track of your appearance, while you're also glancing in the windows, while you're also aware of the network of who's ahead of you or behind you, of whether Agnes is at her door or the lavender seller is at her corner. This is the complexity of moving through public space as a woman who is also a servant, who is also trying to maintain her professional presentation while conducting her employer's errands, while navigating a physically difficult environment. You do all of it simultaneously. You've been doing all of it simultaneously since October. By March, the simultaneity has become habitual, has stopped requiring conscious attention, has become the background operation of being this person in this city, the way walking itself is a background operation. Your legs carry you without you directing them. This is what settling in looks like. The noise of Cheapside is something people who've never been in a pre-industrial city underestimate. The noise of 500,000 people living without machines means the noise is human noise and animal noise, which is louder than you'd think and more varied, because every sound that in a later era would be made by an engine or a motor is instead made by a person or an animal, or a person directing an animal, and people and animals are louder in certain frequencies than machines are. The vendors are loudest. They have to be loudest because everyone else is also loud, and if you're not the loudest voice in the crowd, your voice is lost in the crowd, and if your voice is lost in the crowd, you don't sell anything. Oysters, fresh oysters, buy my fine oysters. Hot pies here, buy my hot pies. New broadsides, latest news, a penny the sheet, the latest from Parliament. Knives to grind, bring your knives, any knives to grind today. Each voice has its pitch and its rhythm and its particular delivery. The oyster woman's voice drops on the last word. buy my fine oysters, an emphasis that suggests she's surprised and offended that you're not already buying her oysters. The knife grinder has a cadence that carries further than you'd expect, a slight rise on knives that pierces through the general noise the way high notes carry better than low notes. You know their voices now. You know who's usually where. The oyster woman is at the corner of Bread Street in the mornings and moves further east after midday as her stock diminishes. The pie man is stationary. He has a cart with a brazier and the brazier doesn't move, at the narrowing before the conduit. The knife grinder moves, and in the sound of all of this, in the constant layered noise of Cheapside, you are navigating. The sound is also information, the sudden shout of "where below" from a window above means step away from the building immediately. Something is being thrown from above, which in London means what you think it means. The specific pattern of cartwheels that tells you a heavy load is coming fast and you need to be at the edge rather than the middle. The silence that sometimes falls around a certain kind of argument. The silence of a crowd that's deciding whether to get involved. You read the street the way you read the surface of a basin, for information, for clues, for the signs of what's coming. And in the windows of Cheapside are the windows of a street that is trying to sell you things. Every shop front is an act of persuasion, every window a display designed to make you want what's inside. The goldsmiths show their gold, yellow and gleaming, the light bouncing off chains and rings and plate. The drapers show their cloth, folded and arranged by colour, the deep blues and dark greens of good wool, the lighter colours of linen. The spice merchant has his window packed with jars and small boxes, the visual suggestion of what's inside supplemented by the smell that escapes through the door, cinnamon and pepper and something unidentifiable and exotic. And reflected in all of these, your face, not in all of them equally, not in all of them usefully. The spice merchant's window is too small and too full, the draper's glass is old and wavy, but the goldsmiths, the silversmiths, the 2 or 3 establishments that clean their windows with professional pride because clean windows make their expensive goods look better, those are your allies. You have opinions about windows now. You have developed opinions about the quality of reflective surfaces available on the streets you walk daily in a way that you could not have anticipated when you arrived from Wiltshire in October and thought a pewter spoon was the best you could expect. The pewter spoon is still in the 3rd drawer from the left. You still use it. Not because you have to, the small glass is sufficient for the mornings, but because it's there, and the habit has become part of your morning the way the cold water is part of your morning, a ritual of the hands and the body that predates the better tool and has become its own thing, its own small ceremony. This is how women's rituals work. The tool improves, but the gesture remains. You will wash your face in cold water and check yourself in the spoon, even when you have something better because the body remembers. On the Sunday after the glass shop visit, while the glass was new and the novelty of it hadn't yet become ordinariness, you went to church. Not the church Mrs. Alvington attended. That was St. Mary le Beau, the church whose bells you'd been waking to for months, and it was above your station, socially, for your Sunday attendance, the congregations in these things being organised by the same hierarchies that organised everything else. You went to St. Vedast on Foster Lane, a wren church of the kind that had been rising all over the city for the past 20 years, the rebuilding after the Great Fire still ongoing, the new churches still being completed, the scaffolding still on some of them, the smell of fresh stone and new mortar mixing with the older smells of the city. The Sunday church was also, you had discovered, a social occasion. Not in the way that made it less religious, or at least people didn't say it out loud, but in the way that everything in London was also social, that every gathering of people was also a market of information, that wherever half a dozen Londoners gathered, there was also a conversation happening about who they were and what they were doing and what it meant. In church, you saw your neighbours, the Cheapside neighbours you'd been seeing in passing for months, the woman from 3 doors down who you'd recognised but not spoken to, the man who ran the print shop on the other side of the street and nodded to you when you passed his door, the family from the house on the corner whose children you'd heard through the shared wall of the courtyard. In church they were identifiable, stationed in the pews that corresponded to their place in the street's hierarchy. And in church you were also visible. You had not fully processed this before. This was one of the few contexts in your week where you were in public, in good light, among people who knew you by sight if not by name, and where the assessment was ongoing and mutual and somewhat prolonged. Church lasted an hour of being visible, of your appearance being present to people who'd look at you, if only because they had relatively little else to look at. You were wearing your better cap, the 4-pin setup which by now was as automatic as breathing. The woman in the pew in front of you turned at one point. She was from the house on Bread Street corner. You'd seen her many times. And she looked at you with the frank curiosity that Sunday church seems to encourage, the social permission to actually look at people you normally just nod to in passing. She looked at you for a moment, looked at your cap, your collar, your gown. Then she smiled, not warmly, not coldly, just the small social smile of someone who has assessed the person they're looking at and found nothing to object to. And then she turned back to the front. You had passed her test. You had, in that moment of being fully seen, passed. This was what the morning's work was for. The cold water and the 4 pins and the small glass on the windowsill. It was all for this. For the Sunday in church when someone looked at you properly and found nothing to object to. For the Monday on Cheapside, when Agnes touches your arm because your cap has shifted and you can correct it immediately, because you know what straight feels like from having seen it in the glass this morning. For the Tuesday in Mrs. Alvington's bedroom when she glances at you over her shoulder in the Venetian mirror and the glance says, "Fine, fine, continue." For the ability to move through the world looking like what you intend to look like. This is what women do, what they have always done, with obsidian and bronze and pewter and French glass and Venetian mirrors and winter ice, with other women's eyes and cold basins and the backs of spoons, with whatever the world provides, and the world has never provided quite enough, and women have always managed anyway. Let me go further back, because I haven't gone back far enough yet. Because the obsidian mirrors of Turkey are 8,000 years old, and that is very old, but they are not the beginning. They are the beginning of the ones we've found. Before that, before the archaeological record begins, there was water. Water is the oldest mirror. The still surface of a pool, a river in the early morning before the current disturbs it. The flat face of a puddle after rain in a world without traffic to ripple it. Water shows you your reflection as faithfully as the angle and the light allow, and the angle and the light in a world without buildings are sometimes very favourable indeed. The still pond on a windless morning, the light coming in flat and even across the water's surface gives you, not perfection, not the Venetian clarity, but a true image, your face in the dark water with the colours of the dawn sky above it, complete and upright and detailed. Women have been finding still water to look at themselves in since before women were women in the current sense. since before the tools existed to make anything more intentional, the pool of water is the first mirror. The impulse that drives a woman to find it is exactly the same impulse that drove the development of obsidian and bronze and glass. The impulse is primordial. Narcissus is a man in the story, the man who falls in love with his reflection in the pool. But the story was almost certainly understood when it was told to be about something men were thought to be above, which is the concern with one's own appearance. The Greek tradition that spawned the Narcissus story was also the tradition that made bronze mirrors standard household items, that showed Greek women in pottery paintings looking into bronze discs at their own faces, that valued beauty and its maintenance in ways that required, implicitly, the ability to see oneself. The story is about vanity, yes, but the vanity it caricatures is women's vanity. The thing men noticed that women did. The thing men decided was frivolous, because it was something they themselves did not need to worry about with the same urgency. The truth is that Narcissus is a warning dressed up as a story. He falls into the pool and drowns, overcome by love for his own reflection. The warning is, be careful how much you look at yourself. You might lose yourself in it. The warning is directed at women, implicitly, because women were the ones who needed to look at themselves most consistently, and the men who were making up the warnings found this suspicious. Women looked at themselves because they were assessed on their appearances and needed the information. The warnings were the response of people who noticed the looking and decided to make it a moral failing. This pattern runs through 1,000 years of moralizing literature. The mirror, symbol of vanity, the looking glass as attribute of sinful pride, the woman who looks too long at herself as a woman who is neglecting what she should be attending to. The caricature of the vain woman at her glass, the French word for mirror, miroir, giving the English word for something that distorts or flatters, the whole cultural apparatus of making looking at yourself into something women should feel guilty about, which is convenient. Because guilt about looking at yourself means being willing to manage your appearance with less information than you'd need to do it properly, which means accepting that your appearance might not be exactly right, which means being available to correction from whoever has the information you don't have, which means remaining dependent on others to tell you whether you're presentable, whether you're acceptable, whether the world finds you adequate. The guilty looking glass creates the dependent woman. You have stopped feeling guilty about looking in the glass. This is not a dramatic moment of liberation. It is just a quiet settling of something. The small glass on the attic windowsill is yours. You saved for it. You use it. It tells you what you need to know about your appearance so that you can do your job correctly and move through the world with the information that the world already has about you. You look in it every morning, and you look in the shop windows, and you use Agnes's eye and Bess's honesty, and you are managing your appearance with the tools available, and you feel, about this, nothing except the ordinary satisfaction of doing what needs to be done. You are not Narcissus. You're a working woman in London in 1693 who needs to know what she looks like, and she has found a way to know it, and that is that. But the women who can't find a way, the women too poor even for a second-hand French handheld glass, the women who have only water and the network, they are also not Narcissus. They are also just working, also just doing what they have to do, also just managing with the tools available, which have never been adequate, which they work with anyway. All of them, back through the centuries, the Greek woman with her bronze disc, the Egyptian noblewoman with her copper mirror, the medieval woman with her pewter plate, the Tudor woman with her polished steel, all of them doing the same work with different tools for the same reason. The world requires it. The tools are insufficient. They manage anyway. There is one ritual I haven't told you about yet, and it matters. On Wednesdays, Mrs. Alvington does her full toilet. Not the morning toilet, that happens every day, the quick assembly at the dressing table, the basic presentation for the day's work. The full toilet happens on Wednesdays, a full hour, sometimes more, devoted entirely to the maintenance of her face and hair, an undertaking that requires most of your attention, all of your skill, and everything you have learned about the specific geography of this woman's face and what it needs from you. You learn a lot about faces at the full toilet. Mrs. Alvington is 43. You know this because you heard her tell someone she was 40 and then later do the arithmetic that confirmed the telling was slightly optimistic. She is 43 with the face of a woman who has lived in London for most of those years, which means the skin has the particular texture that comes from coal smoke and tallow candles and the hard water from London's wells, a texture that is neither young nor old in the simple sense, but is specifically geographically London, the kind of skin that tells you where a person has spent their life if you know what to look for. Her forehead lines are deeper on the left side than the right. She's left-handed, and the leftward tilt of her head when she's thinking has created asymmetrical furrows. Her eyes are good eyes, still clear, the grey-blue colour that reads in most lights as simply grey. Her teeth are her anxiety. They are not her teeth fault. It is the era's fault. Sugar is new enough to be fashionable and old enough to have done its damage, and Mrs. Alvington took sugar in everything in her 30s and is paying for it now in small ways, in the slight caution of her smile, in the way she holds her lips when she's uncertain. None of this you have thought to yourself explicitly. All of it you have absorbed through the close work of attending her face for 4 months, through the proximity of the toilet table, through the weeks of small corrections that have compounded into something like understanding. You know her face better than she knows it herself. This is probably true of every lady's maid and her mistress. You have the angle she doesn't. You have the face on view, the view from outside, the view from behind and the side. She has the mirror. The mirror gives her the reversed self-image that is her primary reference. You have the actual face, the one the world sees, which is slightly different. This is the lady's maid's peculiar knowledge. On Wednesdays, this knowledge becomes technical. The dressing table is in the window bay, the best light in the room, the north light, which is the steady light, the light that doesn't shift with the angle of the sun. Mrs. Alvington's predecessor in this house had the table placed here deliberately, had understood that north light is the honest light, the light that shows you what's there rather than what you want to see. The south-facing window light in the afternoon can be flattering to the point of deception. The morning east light can be harsh. The north light at 10 in the morning on a clear day is as close to truth as domestic light comes. There is a basin on the table, there is the Venetian mirror, there is a second, smaller mirror, an angled stand mirror, good quality, not Venetian, English probably or Dutch, that allows Mrs. Alvington to see the back of her head when you arrange her hair, the angled second mirror reflecting into the first, creating the doubled image that is the only way a person can see the back of their own head without turning around and losing the view. You have thought about this arrangement many times. The ingenuity of the two-mirror system, the way it creates a kind of periscope effect, allowing you to see around your own head. 2 mirrors facing each other at an angle, and suddenly you have access to your own back. It is simple and effective, and it was discovered, or rediscovered, probably discovered independently by many women over many years, exactly because the need was there. The back of the head matters professionally. The back of the head is what people see when you're walking away. The back of the head is what matters in church when you're in a forward-facing pew. The two-mirror system addresses a specific gap in self-knowledge. You use a two-mirror system yourself now. The small glass on the windowsill, supplemented when necessary by the second small hand mirror you acquired in January. A cheap thing, a tin-backed mirror with a wavy surface, 8p, which is not nothing but is achievable. Angled to catch the reflection of the first. It doesn't give you a perfect image of the back of your head. It gives you enough of an image to know whether the back of your cap is sitting correctly. Enough is enough. Mrs. Alvington's Wednesday toilet proceeds in stages. The face first, then the hair. The face. A gentle cleaning with a cloth wrung out in rose water, which smells of summer regardless of the season. The rose petals dried and kept in a sealed jar and infused in water as needed. A ritual that goes back so far in European practice that it has stopped being thought of as a ritual, and is simply what a woman does to her face in the morning, the way she does it. The smell of roses so permanently associated with female grooming that it has become definitional. You wipe the cloth gently across her forehead, her cheeks, around her nose, along the jaw, under the chin. Not harshly. The skin of 43 is not the skin of 23, and scrubbing would produce something that looks scrubbed, which is not useful. Then the complexion work. This is where the period makes itself known, where 1693 is specifically 1693 and not any other time. Mrs. Alvington's complexion maintenance involves materials that a later era will understand as dangerous. Bismuth white, a lead-based powder mixed with bismuth that gives the face the fashionable pale surface that signals nobility, signals indoor living, signals freedom from the weather and the sun. Lead white has been in cosmetic use in Europe since the Romans. You're doing to Mrs. Alvington's face what Roman women did, what medieval women did, what Tudor women did, what every generation of women who could afford it has done since the technology became available. And what every generation of women who used it also did was absorb lead through the skin, slowly, over years, because the skin is permeable and lead is lead, and the body can't tell the difference between poison and paint when it absorbs through the dermis. You don't know this yet. No one knows this yet in the way they will know it later. There are women who have noticed that prolonged use of face paint causes problems, a dullness to the skin, a certain greyness that develops, tremors in some cases. But the cause and effect chain is not understood, not articulated, not part of the general knowledge that a lady's maid in 1693 would have access to. You apply the bismuth white carefully, with a badger hair brush, starting at the centre of the forehead and working outward, feathering the edges to avoid the abrupt line that looks painted rather than naturally pale. This is a skill. The feathered edge is what separates the competent from the incompetent, what separates the appearance of skin from the appearance of paint. Mrs. Alvington has told you explicitly that she can tell when her previous girl did this. The edges were visible, she said. You could see where the paint stopped. It was like a mask rather than a face. It was not right. You have been praised for your edges. You take the praise quietly. You file it as information. Then the cheek colour, the rose in the bismuth white, a small brush and a colour made from beeswax and red ochre, and a little carmine from dried cochineal beetles, ground fine and mixed carefully, the red becoming pink when applied thinly over the pale base. The thinness being everything, the layering being the work. Too thick and it's paint, too thin and it vanishes. The right amount is the amount that looks like Mrs. Alvington's face after she's been standing near a fire for 10 minutes. The warmth that comes from inside, not the colour that was put on outside. You apply it. You check it in the Venetian mirror, bending to look over a shoulder, seeing a face in the glass, assessing from the angle of someone looking at a face, not an angle, seeing it whole. It's right. It is almost always right now. 4 months ago it was not always right. The Venetian mirror is your quality check. It is better than your assessment without a mirror because mirrors show you the colour without the distortion of familiarity, without the way that looking at a face directly makes you start to see the individual components, the cheekbone, the brush stroke, the specific spot where the colour meets the pale, rather than the whole effect, which is what a stranger sees. The mirror makes you strange again, makes you see it freshly, and freshness is what you need to catch the errors. You learned this in your 2nd week. You had applied the cheek colour and it looked right to you, looking directly at her face in the north light, and then you moved to arrange a piece of her hair and happened to glance at the Venetian and saw that the colour on her left cheek was slightly too high, sitting on the cheekbone rather than just below it, creating an effect that looked less like flush and more like a mark. You went back and corrected it. She didn't notice, but you noticed. After that you always check in the Venetian. The hair comes after the face. Mrs. Alvington's hair is dark brown with the first grey coming in at the temples, the grey that in a younger woman would be cause for anxiety, and in a woman of her position and her established household is simply the hair she has, the hair that corresponds to her age and her station, not shameful but not hidden either. Her cap, not the indoor morning cap, but the elaborate pinned structure that goes over dressed hair for formal occasions, will cover most of the temples anyway. For daily wear, the hair goes up, pinned and arranged at the back and sides, with the portions at the front softened and dressed into the loops and curls that the current fashion demands. Current fashion in 1693 is the fontange, the style that came from France and then swept England, the upswept arrangement that builds the hair and the wire supports and the ribbons and lace into a structure that extends upward from the head, sometimes substantially upward, the extreme versions rising so high that women had to turn sideways to get through doorways and couldn't sit in sedan chairs without adjusting their arrangement. Mrs. Alvington's version is moderate. She is not a woman who adopts the extreme of any fashion, who believes she has said to you that extremes make you look like you're trying, and that nothing is worse than looking like you're trying. The moderate fontange, then, dressed up but not absurd, high but not architecturally challenging. The wire support goes in first. You have built this structure many times now, and your hands know the architecture without instruction. The 2 curved wires that anchor at the back of the hair and sweep upward, providing the scaffold on which the hair and lace will be arranged. The wires are flexible enough to adjust but hold their shape once placed, and the placing requires knowing exactly where they need to sit to support the structure that will go on top without either falling backward or pitching the whole arrangement forward. Then the back hair pinned up over the scaffold in a way that hides the wires. Then the side hair, dressed in the loose waves and soft loops that frame the face, the portions that are visible in most social situations, the portions most people look at. Then the front hair, which is the most visible and the most technical, the small curls that sit along the hairline, the tiny tendrils at the temples, the arrangement of the foremost portions that will be what someone sees when they look at Mrs. Alvington face on. You have learned the curling iron, the small iron implement heated in the fire's coals, and then applied to small portions of hair, wrapping the hair around the barrel and holding it until the curl sets, then releasing it into the loop or wave you want. The temperature has to be right. Too cool and the curl won't set. Too hot and the hair scorches, which smells catastrophic and leaves a mark. You test the temperature on a scrap of cloth. You've burned the cloth twice. You've never burned the hair. You check the whole arrangement in the two-mirror system, the Venetian showing the front, the angled stand mirror showing the back in the Venetian's reflection, yourself moving between the two views, assessing from all angles. It holds. The construction holds. Yes, Mrs. Alvington says, looking at herself. Not a large response, but it's the right response, the response that means, yes, this is what it should be. You may leave off. We're done here. You are done here. You step back. You put away the brushes and the combs and the curling iron. You cap the bismuth white and put it in its drawer. You straighten the toilet table. And then, briefly, before she turns from the mirror to the rest of her day, you look. You look at the Venetian mirror while she's looking at herself in it. You look at the reflection of the room behind her. You look at the edge of the glass where the frame ends and the silvered surface begins. You look at yourself in the far edge of the glass, tiny, reflected from across the room, your face smaller than your hand at this distance. That is you. Over there in the corner of the most expensive mirror in this house, a small figure with dark eyes and a cap that is sitting exactly as it should, your collar flat, your gown adequate, your face not much visible at this distance, your face the face you have assembled since 5 o'clock with the small glass on the attic windowsill. You look acceptable. You look like what you're supposed to look like. You turn away. The day's work has started. There are things you've learned about mirrors that you didn't expect to learn. You've learned that what a mirror shows you is not neutral. A mirror shows you a specific kind of truth, the optical truth, the reflected truth, and that truth is shaped by the quality of the glass, the angle of the light, the distance at which you stand from it, the hour of day, the direction of the windows. The Venetian mirror in the late afternoon shows you something different from what the Venetian mirror shows you at 10 o'clock in the north light. Your small glass in the early morning winter dark shows you something different from your small glass in the spring morning light. The same face, different truths. This is deeply strange when you first encounter it. The mirror presents itself as objective. What could be more objective than optical physics, than the reflection of light from a smooth surface? But the mirror's objectivity is conditional. It depends on the glass, the light, the angle. Change any of those things and you get a different image. None of them is more true than the others. All of them are true. They're just true under different conditions. This means you are not one thing. You are the sum of every surface you've ever been reflected in, every light, every angle. You're the Mrs. Alvington's Venetian morning version, and the attic window glass dawn version, and the frost-edged ice of the New Year Thames version, and the goldsmith shop window midday version. All of these are you. None of them is more definitively you than the others. The medieval church had a word for the kind of mirror that shows you this, the kind that shows you not your earthly face but your spiritual self, the inner face that God sees, which is more true than the outer face any glass could show. The speculum animae, the mirror of the soul, a moral and spiritual technology. The glass shows you the outside, which can lie. which can be arranged to present well. The speculum animae shows you the inside, which cannot lie, which presents itself without preparation. But no one has ever actually seen the speculum animae. Everyone has seen a looking glass. And the looking glass, imperfect as it is, tells you something true enough to work with. The composite you've assembled, the multiple angles, the multiple lights, the network of other eyes. It's not perfect. It's not the speculum animae. It's not a complete view of what you are. But it's what you have. And what you have is enough to go out into the world each morning and do your work and move through the streets and be assessed and pass and sometimes not pass and correct the cap and go on. Enough. Let me tell you about medieval mirrors. Not the church's mirror of the soul kind, the actual physical objects, the things people made and sold and used when glassmaking was in its earliest European stages, and the alternatives to glass were what they'd always been. In the medieval period in Europe, the most common reflective surface for personal use was polished metal, specifically polished silver, or silver-backed bronze, or high-quality polished steel. These weren't cheap objects. The polishing alone required skilled labour, the right abrasives, hours of work, but they were cheaper than glass, which was being made in Europe from around the 4th century onward, but wasn't being made consistently or affordably. The glass mirrors that existed in medieval Europe were small, thick and convex. The technique for making flat glass mirrors didn't yet exist, so mirrors were made from blown glass. A glass blower would blow a small sphere, and then, in a complex and dangerous process, introduce a molten mixture of tin and lead into the interior of the sphere, coating the inside with metal, and then cut the sphere into pieces. The pieces were convex, curved, because they were sections of a sphere, and small, because the sphere had to be small enough to work with. A medieval glass mirror was roughly the size of a large coin, curved inward like a bowl seen from the outside, and it gave you a circular, miniaturized, slightly distorted view of whatever was in front of it. These small convex mirrors appear in medieval paintings, often in the corner of interior scenes, hanging on the wall of a prosperous merchant's home. The painter Jan van Eyck famously placed one in the background of the Arnolfini portrait in 1434, a convex mirror reflecting the room behind the viewer, showing two small figures in the doorway, the whole scene reduced to a circle of reflected information, distorted by the curve, complete in its miniature way. Van Eyck painted it with extraordinary care, the reflected room detailed enough that you can read the floor tiles and count the window panes. He was showing off. He was also showing you what a mirror was in 1434. Small, circular, convex, a luxury item that reflected the room around it and gave you information about what was happening behind you. This is also what the mirror was for in many households, not primarily for self-examination, but for seeing what was happening in the room at large, what was behind you, who was coming toward you from the direction you weren't facing. Convex mirrors were placed in shops and in rooms, for the same reason convex mirrors are placed at blind corners in modern supermarkets, to see around obstacles, to catch movement at the periphery. Self-examination was one use. Surveillance of space was another. In the late medieval and early Renaissance period, the glass-making industry was developing, slowly, new techniques. Glassmakers in Germany and then in France developed a method for making flat glass by blowing and then cutting, blowing a cylinder of glass, cutting it open and flattening it in a kiln, which gave you flat glass rather than curved, larger pieces, more consistency. Flat glass was used first for windows, then, When someone thought to back it with metal, tin, mercury amalgam, the technique that would come to define mirror making, flat glass became flat mirrors, clear, undistorted, able to show you something close to the actual proportions of your face. The technique reached Venice in the 15th century. From Venice it was hoarded, protected, kept secret by the Council of Ten under pain of death. The Venetians had found a process that produced glass clearer and flatter and more reflective than anything else being made, and they had no intention of allowing anyone else to learn how they did it. The secret lasted about 2 centuries. Then France bought it in the 1660s, and then England had French mirrors, and eventually the price came down enough that an English household of the middling sort could afford a Venetian-style mirror in a gilt frame in the best bedroom, and a second-hand French handheld glass could come to live on an attic windowsill. This is the history compressing. This is 200 years of trade and technology and state secrecy and industrial espionage settling into the small glass that sits on the windowsill of the room where you sleep. The glass on your windowsill is the end of a very long story, and the story continues after you. The glass will get cheaper and more common. By the 19th century, a small-looking glass will be an ordinary household item even in very modest homes. And by the 20th century, mirrors will be in every bathroom and every shop-changing room and every compact and every phone's selfie camera. The iteration will continue, the desire for the information that a reflective surface provides, continuing to drive innovation. The impulse that made someone in Çatalhöyük in 6000 BCE pick up an obsidian stone and notice that they could see their face in it, continuing forward through every century, never quite satisfied, always pushing toward clarity and size and accuracy and affordability. The obsidian worker, the Egyptian coppersmith, the Venetian glass blower, the French factory worker at Saint-Gobain, the glassmaker in the shop on Friday Street, you with your 8 shillings and sixpence, one continuous story, one continuous impulse. To see, there is also this. The women who shared. Women who couldn't afford their own mirror found access to mirrors through the network of neighbours and employers and friends and acquaintances, and the various social obligations that structure a working woman's week, all created moments where a woman without a mirror was proximate to a woman who had one. The kitchen mirror at the Chadwick household, the shop window on the jeweller's corner, Mrs. Alvington's Venetian, glimpsed over her shoulder. This sharing was not charity. It was not remarkable. It was simply how women managed when the individual resource was inaccessible. The resource was shared, distributed, accessed through proximity and relationship rather than through ownership. Bess does not have a mirror of her own. Bess has not saved for a glass and probably will not. Not because she doesn't understand its usefulness, but because Bess's scale of finances is slightly different from yours. Her wages slightly lower, her costs slightly higher, her family in Southwark sending her 2 younger brothers school fees when there are school fees to send. Bess has your glass. Bess uses your glass every morning. The 2 of you doing your caps and collars in relay, in the attic window's early light, and in exchange Bess's eye is your eye on the street, has been since the first week, and the exchange is understood between you without being stated. This is the economy of the mirror before mirrors were affordable. This is how it worked. Not every woman with her own glass, but every woman with access to the network that included glasses. The private glass that is shared. The expensive Venetian that is glimpsed. The shop window at the jeweller's. The river in winter, the back of a spoon, the access is imperfect. The access is distributed and indirect and dependent on relationships that may shift or end. The access is better than nothing. It is always better than nothing. The women manage. They always manage. February. A specific day in February, a Tuesday. Cold, but not the killing cold of January. The river thawed, the ice gone, the city back to its usual grey damp. You were on an errand to Bucklersbury, the street east of Cheapside where the apothecaries cluster, where Mrs. Alvington sent you for a specific preparation for her headaches. A thing made of willow bark and something the apothecary called spirit of vitriol, and 2 other ingredients you couldn't remember accurately enough to tell me now. And you were passing the entrance to a court between 2 buildings, one of those narrow London courts that open suddenly off the street like a gap in teeth. And in the court there was a woman. She was perhaps 60. She was sitting on a step outside a door. She had a clay pipe. She was doing something with her free hand, the hand not holding the pipe, something to the front of her cap, adjusting it. And she was using the window above her to do it. The window of the house across the court, maybe 8 feet away from her, was a window of old, wavy glass that caught the dull February light and gave back a reflection. Dull, wavy, the colours lost, but the shapes there, the general arrangement visible, the cap and the head and the woman's face in approximate relation to each other. She adjusted the cap, looked at the reflection, adjusted again, looked again. You watched for a moment from the entrance to the court, and she didn't see you, or if she saw you, she didn't care, because she was busy. Then she got it right, or close enough, and she put the pipe back in her mouth and looked away from the window. You walked on, but you thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. The 60-year-old woman with her pipe and her quart and the wavy old glass giving her the approximate information she needed. The specific competence of working with what's available. The 0 fuss about it, no ceremony, just the window and the cap and the adjustment, and then move on. That's all it is. That's all it has ever been. You use what the world gives you. You manage. You move on. You. In the attic in 1693, with the small glass on the windowsill, the bells have struck. How many times? You stopped counting. It's late. It's past the hour when you should be asleep. Your body knows it's past that hour. Your eyes heavy. Your thoughts losing their edges, becoming soft around the borders. The composite rests in you. Today's composite, today's assembled self. The glass in the morning, the goldsmith's windows, Agnes at the corner of Bread Street, Bess's eyebrow at supper, Mrs. Alvington's glance in the Venetian mirror. The spot is gone. The cap held all day. The gown was adequate. The collar stayed flat through the afternoon. Fine, all of it fine. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock bells and the basin and the dark and the glass in the morning window light. Tomorrow, let the composite rest now. Let the pewter spoon rest in its drawer. Let the copper pots hang in the kitchen. Let Mrs. Alvington's mirror sit covered in the dark of her bedroom, not reflecting anything, resting from its daily labour of showing her herself. Let Agnes go to sleep in the house 3 doors down, her cap on its hook, her morning's work done. Let Bess breathe beside you. Let the bow bells ring. You came to London because there was a letter and a chance, and a mistress who needed a lady's maid, and a place in a household that was better than staying in Wiltshire forever. You came because the world is larger than one village, and you wanted to know how large. You are finding out. You found out that the world is large enough to have looking glasses that cost more than houses, and small enough that the women on your street will tell you when your cap is tilted without being asked. You found out that the city is a surface that reflects you back at yourself in fragments, in shop windows and ice and the backs of spoons, and that what you make of the fragments is up to you, is the work of months and attention and the gradual development of something like self-knowledge. You found out that knowing yourself is not the same as seeing yourself, and that both matter, and that neither is ever fully complete, and that this is fine. This is how it is. This is the ongoing work of being a person in the world. You found out that there are women everywhere doing this work, always have been, in every century, on every continent, with every surface that the world offered them, doing the work of seeing themselves with whatever tools the world provided, none of which were ever quite enough, all of which they used anyway. This is what it means to be a woman moving through a world that looks at her. You use what there is, you build a composite, you settle into yourself, and then you sleep. Let sleep come. Let the city outside do its nighttime work without you. Let the carters and the watchmen and the women in other attics in other houses settle into their own dark, their own composites resting until morning. Let the bells go. Let the fire downstairs breathe its slow red breath. Let the cold of the room be just enough, and your blanket be just enough, and Bess beside you be just enough warmth. Let the morning be tomorrow. Let the glass be on the window sill. Let it be enough for tonight. It is. Good night.